201. Ted's Egg. It was Sunday, June 27th, just over 2 weeks since the end of the break. Today, Ted and his friends had planned to go shopping and help Neville and Ron buy their wands. Hermione had arrived exceptionally early, practically forcing her father to drive her there straight after breakfast. Not being able to use magic for more than half a month had driven her nearly mad. Mr. Granger had no choice but to take her to the leaky cauldron. Ansu had flown back a step earlier to tell Ted to wait by the entrance. Ted greeted them both, and of course he couldn't just let Mr. Granger leave right away. He was Hermione's father, not a chauffeur. Ted invited Mr. Granger to sit, and, since he had been driving, the three of them ordered non-alcoholic butterbeer. Ted also produced a small gift for Mr. Granger to take back for Hermione's mother. For the Dragon Boat Festival 2 days earlier, Ted had completed a minor task and received a one-time recipe card as a reward: fruit zongzi. It was a fusion of Chinese and Western desserts, sticky rice dumpling filled with fruit flavors, a little like a fruit pie, and it had an unusual, subtle effect. Eating one could ease negative emotions and keep the spirit buoyant. Mr. Granger unwrapped one, peeled back the bamboo leaves, and took a small bite of the fragrant sticky rice, brown sugar, and the juicy fruit filling. The fillings ranged widely: apples, pears, even tomatoes or mangoes, so each one could be a surprise. He tasted it and exclaimed, "Ted, your zongzi is fantastic. Even as a dentist, I can't refuse this. I'll have to recommend it to my patients." When he asked where it was from, Ted simply explained how to make it and urged him to promote it to clients, which would also help his dental practice. Thanks to Ted's hospitality and the little gift, Mr. Granger left in a cheerful mood, no longer worrying about being on the outs with his daughter. Ted had made a good impression. No sooner had Mr. Granger gone than Hermione dragged Ted down to the basement, ready to do magic. This forced hiatus had been unbearable for her. As a witch, she needed magic like air. During the holidays, she had kept her wand locked away to avoid accidental spells. Now she wanted to let loose and see what Ted had been up to. She had heard rumors. Ted, Neville, Harry, and Ron's families had agreed to form some kind of second-hand home. In his letters, Ted had mentioned collecting materials to hatch an egg. "Where is it? The egg you're going to hatch?" Hermione scanned the basement. Shelves and books lined the walls. A desk and an experimental bench stood opposite each other, and the automatic stirring cauldron still glowed beneath the bench. Ted reached into what looked like a spatially extended pouch, really a card, and produced a dark red egg, slightly smaller than a soccer ball, its surface covered in odd bumps and patterns. It was the egg of a red dragon, an Azarothan one, Rhea. Hermione was not the sort of witch who had unnaturally acute magical senses. She was precise and controlled, but she could still feel the intense magical fluctuations radiating from the egg. It gave her a strange, unmistakable sensation. Where did you get this?" she asked. It was clearly no ordinary object. Ted didn't want to explain the egg's origin. One lie would only demand 100 more. The world had been changing so fast lately. What was so strange about finding an otherworldly dragon egg? He had stepped on more than his share of dragon eggs in raids up an Upper Blackrock Spire. "My guild friends call me the harmonious high-speed rail king." He liked to joke, better than the train king, because he rode around in rocket boots, stomping eggs. He'd killed whelps and dragonkin in places like Dustwallow Marsh, skinned them, and once even got a black dragon whelpling drop. Hermione didn't press about where the egg came from. Instead, she asked how he planned to hatch it and what he knew about it. Ted leaned close and whispered, "It's a dragon egg." "A dragon egg?" Hermione's eyes widened. "What kind of dragon?" She already felt a flicker of worry. She hadn't forgotten the Norwegian Ridgeback Hagrid raised in their first year and the chaos it caused. A dragon could tear a building apart. No amount of money could easily compensate for that. "I don't think it's an ordinary dragon," Ted said softly. Hermione felt his breath on her ear and flushed. Then Ted added, "I suspect it's a dragon egg from another world." "Another world?" Hermione didn't immediately react. That was the common response. Despite the massive changes sweeping through their lives, new peoples, new herbs, new magical items from other realms, most wizards had settled into a slow acceptance, like frogs in warming water. Unless the changes hit them directly, they often didn't notice or chose not to. You only feel the ripple when economic prices rise, or the news leans one way, or bureaucratic priorities shift. Even the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, whose job routinely involved non-human visitors, had grown accustomed to the presence of otherworldly things. The celestial convergence had been affecting their work for a decade. So an extra dragon egg from another world didn't necessarily sound impossible. Hermione still stared at the red egg as Ted began laying out his plans. The conditions to hatch it were demanding. 40 different kinds of material. Last year, Ted had gathered 6 relatively common items. In the early weeks of this year, he'd obtained 6 more through the Xianyu website and through contacts. Those had cost him less than 80 galleons in total. 10 more materials were available on the open market, though they would take time to acquire. Ted had asked Sirius to help him source them. Much of the high-end material trade was controlled by pure-blood families, and ordinary folk couldn't always buy what they needed, no matter how much money they had. If he had to buy the remaining 10 types at market prices, the bill would easily reach 2,000 galleons. The internal acquaintances prices might bring it under 900. The markup was outrageous. Half price for strangers, full price for friends. An effective monopoly on rare magical materials. If it weren't for the influx of unknown materials from other worlds, the wizarding market might have stayed frozen for decades. The last 18 materials were the rarest. Some existed only as names, with no known holders. Some were rumored but hadn't surfaced for years. Some belonged to legends and were all but extinct under modern magical practice. A few items he'd never even heard of. Ted suspected they might not be from this world and would need substitution or creative alternatives. One by one, he packed what he had. Terran magma silver ore, high-strength magical creature fossils, heavenly fire dragon heart blood, ancient dragon eyeball fossils, dragon's blood orchid, dragon's blood tree root, and more. He planned to visit Jerry's place in the next few days and didn't want to leave these materials at home. He didn't want to be having fun elsewhere while his house got raided. Better to carry his wealth with him. Chapter 202. A Wand Chooses Its Wizard, A Strange Fate. Ted and Hermione waited for their friends at the ice cream stall in Diagon Alley. Before long, Harry, Neville, and the others arrived. They all ate ice cream while they waited for Ron. The plan was to buy wands together today. After about half an hour, Ron finally appeared, trailed by the twins and Ginny. Ron shrugged and pursed his lips. I couldn't help it. My brothers insisted on coming along. Sit down! Ted motioned to the group. The twins squeezed in beside him, and George leaned over to whisper, We have something to tell you. You have to hear this, Fred added dramatically. Ted clicked his tongue. I hope it's good news. Of course. Everything's good news when we're around you, George replied with a grin. Ted grinned back. Our standards for good might differ a little, he thought. Ginny sat between Harry and Hermione, but kept glancing at Neville. Neville fidgeted, sensing something was off. Then Ron suddenly stilled and let out, Ugh! What's up? Neville asked. Ron pointed at his ice cream and blanched. This is poisoned. It turned out to be a little promotion put on by Fortescue's ice cream parlor called Who's the Lucky One? Among 100 taro-flavored cones, there was one that tasted of eggplant, and Ron had been the unlucky or lucky recipient. Florin Fortescue, the cheerful owner in his 40s, rewarded Ron, the lucky one, with 3 extra random-flavored cones. He'd been trying out a new line based on the Bertie Bott's Every Flavor Beans idea, more surprises for customers. Ron scoffed while devouring his reward. Do we still feel like first years? Still excited by Every Flavor Beans? This just proves Every Flavor ice cream is terrible. And yet he kept eating, chomping away as if nothing was wrong. Now, with everyone assembled, it was time to buy wands at Ollivander's. The large group drew some attention as they made their way down the alley. After all, it wasn't every day you saw so many young witches and wizards shopping together. The bell chimed when they pushed open the door, and Mr. Ollivander emerged from the back as if summoned by the sound. He blinked at the crowd. So many. Do you need after-sales service? His precise, dry voice betrayed a hint of surprise. Neville and Ron looked more nervous than he did. Though they were about to start their 3rd year, this was their first time at Ollivander's, first time buying a wand of their own, and it showed. Ted stepped forward. Hello, Mr. Ollivander. Mr. Ollivander's gaze flicked to Ted's belt. Ah, cedar, phoenix feather, 10 3/4 inches. Mr. Ted Epiphany, I've heard about the good you've done at school. Is your wand still serving you well? It is, Ted said. He suspected the wand maker kept a mental ledger of every wand he sold. These two need to buy theirs today. He nodded toward Neville and Ron. Mr. Ollivander squinted. You don't look like first years. Neville already stood at about 1 meter 74, tall and solid, and Ron, with his hearty appetite, looked older than he was. The idea of them buying new wands made Ollivander raise an eyebrow, but when Ted explained they had been using family wands until now, he accepted it and nodded. Very well, he added softly, with the showman's reverence he always reserved for the moment. We don't sell wands, you see. A wand chooses its wizard. It's a matter of destiny, just a few galleons for a chance to try. Everyone paused and then agreed. The old man had a point. The twins squeezed forward, whispering encouragements. Neville gave Ron a shove, and Ron, losing the contest of will, went first. Try this one. Mr. Ollivander flicked his wand, and a pile of boxes floated toward the front. Ron grabbed one, and, to everyone's alarm, a puff of black smoke burst out of the tip. Given past experiences with snakes and ropes among the group, the sight made a number of them jump and fumble for a quick bubblehead charm, only to find it was just ordinary smoke. Mr. Ollivander watched them in mild puzzlement, as if wondering why the kids were so jumpy. After several tries, Ron found a match. Mr. Ollivander ran a hand along the wood and smiled with that solemn satisfaction reserved for right fits. Core, a heartstring from a Hebridean black dragon, strong, adaptable, very powerful. Wood, whomping willow, particularly effective against humanoid adversaries. You know the whomping willow at Hogwarts, don't you? Ron's face went blank for a moment. I know it all too well. Ollivander's expression grew rueful. Sadly, that tree was damaged last year. Someone did it, and I haven't been able to make wands from its branches since. Do you know who did it? Ron shrugged, deadpan. No idea. Never heard about it. His friends nearly collapsed with laughter. Ginny's face flushed as she bit her sleeve to muffle her amusement. The twins had already fled the shop, their laughter spilling through the doorway. Ted thought back. In the original tale, Ron's second wand would have been chestnut with a unicorn hair core, chestnut being curious wood drawn to skilled magazoologists or herbologists, unicorn hair neutral and suited to many types of magic. But Ron had always preferred power over subtlety, so here his core was a dragon heartstring instead. As for the homping willow, well, fate has its oddities. Neville's turn was less straightforward. Mr. Ollivander's eyes lingered on him, recognition, an electric pause, yet he remained quiet and began presenting boxes as usual. One after another, wands failed to connect. Dozens of them were wrong, and Neville felt the awkwardness tangibly. Mr. Ollivander, however, appeared calm, as though he had foreseen this. Wait a moment, he said, and slipped out through the back. A few minutes later, he returned carrying a pale purple box, his expression solemn and almost reverent. Ah, so it is. One day it would meet its wizard. This is destiny. He opened the box and drew out a wand, gingerly caressing the wood. Holly, phoenix feather, 11 inches. He handed it to Neville. The moment Neville took it, a brilliant blue shimmer radiated from the wand and spun around him in a halo of light. Wow, Ron breathed beside him, jaw-dropping with envy. Mr. Ollivander, savoring the sight of wand and wizard coming together, explained with that meticulous fondness of his, I remember every wand I ever sold. The core of this wand comes from the same phoenix as another wand I sold, its brother. That other wand has a U core, the tree of immortality. Its wizard left this mark on your forehead. Neville's hand went to the scar on his brow, the S-shaped mark that had haunted him. So we truly are connected by fate, he murmured. The mention of Voldemort weighed on Neville, and he fell into a thoughtful gloom. Hermione, pulled along by Harry, went shopping with Ginny. The twins seized the moment and dragged Ted away, whispering urgently that they had something to discuss, leaving Ron to stay with Neville. Ron grumbled, George and Fred must be Ted's long-lost brothers. They get on with him better than with me. Ted was curious. Why the secrecy? Tell me already, he wanted to demand. What the twins said next, though, left him speechless. George said, almost bursting with excitement, We've awakened our stand abilities. Huh, Ted blurted. End of Volume 2. Volume 3 begins with major changes. 203. Demi-human village. Deckard Mund, a pinch of pale green, flue powder was tossed into the fire, and the flames flared a bright emerald. Ted held the spirit crystal servant Parker. Several magical Pokeballs 2.2 jingled at his waist, and the huge raven Ansu perched on his shoulder. He straightened his wizard robes and stepped into the blaze. A strange twisting tug wrapped around him, and with a whoosh, he vanished. More than half of the summer vacation had already passed. It was July. After redeeming this month's Otherworld knowledge and tidying up a few things on the Xianyu website, Ted planned to visit Jerry. At the start of the break, Jerry had still been working in Diagon Alley to help support his family, but in the second week something had happened at home, and he hadn't come out since. Ted wanted to see if he could help. Jerry's letters hinted the situation was getting more complicated. He was no longer the powerless first year who had just stepped into this world. He had resources and connections now, and he could do something for his friend. On the border between England and Scotland, in the Leventhal region, lay the Lost Mountain Range. Locals called it that for good reason. A persistent, clinging fog rolled through the ridges and seldom lifted. Travelers who entered the mist often lost their way, walking in circles until they inexplicably found themselves back outside the mountains. The terrain was rugged and sparsely populated, so ordinary people rarely ventured there. Unsurprisingly, the demi-human villages hidden in hollows of the range had never been discovered by Muggles. One of those villages was Dickamond. According to the Ministry of Magic's Assistant Management Office for Demi-Humans and Human-like Beings, Dickamond had 476 residents. Most were demi-humans: rat ear, rabbit ear, oxhorn, dog ear, cat ear tribes, each tribe numbering from a dozen to several dozen. The oxhorn and rat ear tribes were the largest, each topping 100. The three intelligent races from other worlds, gnomes, dwarves, and elves, received distinctly different treatment. The dwarves had carved an underground settlement, Iron Hammer Fortress, deep in the misty mountains, with roughly 200 residents. Over 100 gnomes, on friendly terms with the dwarves, lived there as well. The elves enjoyed the highest status. Their village, Tamriel, sat further south at the northern end of the Pennines on land the British Ministry of Magic had granted them for self-governance. Tamriel was said to be ringed with enchantments that kept it spring-like all year. The elves even had a separate elf reception office, an indication of their special standing, while other races were managed by the Assistant Management Office. Ted opened his eyes, wiped ash from his face, and stepped out of the fireplace. He cast Axio on himself, then looked around. The flue exit emptied into a small, rather crude shop, wooden walls marked by hand-planing, shelves, and a simple counter stocked with everything from daily necessities to common herbs. Behind the counter stood a middle-aged rat-ear man with graying hair. He pushed his thick glasses up and intoned in a deep voice, "Young wizard, welcome to Dickamond. How can I help you?" Ted studied the man's beard, flecked with white, and asked, "Excuse me, are you Uncle Pooley?" Before Ted left home, Jerry had told him there were only 2 fireplaces on the village flue network, one in the ministry's local office for official use, and the other in Uncle Pooley's general store. The man laughed lightly. "Oh, I wouldn't let you call me Uncle. I'm Pooley. And you are?" "Ted. Ted Epiphany. I'm a classmate of Jerry's." Ted offered his name. "Oh, Ted, Jerry has mentioned you. I even saw a report about you in the Daily Prophet. Quite the remarkable young man." Pooley looked surprised. He hadn't expected to receive one of Jerry's classmates. He glanced at the raven on Ted's shoulder. "Is that Ansu? Jerry talked about him." Ansu puffed up and bowed theatrically. "Of course it's me. People here know who I am." Ted rolled his eyes at the raven's showmanship. Uncle Pooley, hearing Ted was looking for Jerry, offered to guide him. Outside the shop, the village proved as simple as the shop suggested. Compacted dirt paths, only the village center paved with stone. Houses were mainly wooden or mud and thatch, 2 stories at most. The Assistant Management Office building was the only structure with more modern styling. For wizards, building a stone road took little effort, but the demi-humans had never had their own resident wizards until recently, and the ministry had been reluctant to invest directly in mundane infrastructure, even when it would have required minimal magic and manpower. That was one reason young demi-human wizards like Jerry prized their wizard status so much. Without wizards, their races were seen as lower and often discriminated against in the magical world. They passed residential clusters that showcased distinct architectural styles. The Oxhorn tribe had log cabin-like buildings with carved totem poles at the entrances. Rabbit ear houses were thatched and roofed with plants. Rat ear homes were often built into hillsides, two-level dwellings with subterranean ground floors and wooden houses above, resembling a small wooden cottage perched atop a hobbit's bag end. "We're here. This is Shilly and Jerry's house. It wasn't easy to build this little place," Uncle Pooley said, knocking on a round wooden door. After a long pause, the door opened to a slender, middle-aged rat-ear woman. "Pooley?" "Oh, Shilly, this is Jerry's classmate," Pooley said, stepping aside so Ted could be seen. Ted was half a head taller than Pooley. "Jerry's classmate, Ted? He said you might stop by the past few days? Please, come in." Shilly's surprise and hospitality were warm. Pooley excused himself to mind his shop and left. Inside, Shilly poured Ted a cup of hot tea. The brew tasted familiar, Muggle black tea. Ted smiled inwardly. It was indeed the Muggle specialty he had brought along. He sipped as Shilly sat down opposite him, concern in her expression. "Jerry's out," she said. "He went into the mountains this morning with a group of villagers to investigate under the Assistant Management Office's direction." Ted set his cup down. That was the precise reason he had come. "Aunt Shilly?" Jerry didn't go into specifics in his letter. He only said something strange had appeared in the nearby mountains and the office organized an investigation. "Please, tell me exactly what's been happening." Shilly's worry deepened. She began at the beginning. The troubles had started before Hogwarts let out. Small tremors under the Lost Mountain Range, at first thought to be minor earthquakes. The tremors grew more frequent, and then animals and magical beasts began pouring out of the mountains in unusual numbers. Hunting-dependent tribes, like the Dog-Ear tribe, suffered when some mountain creatures went berserk and attacked villages. Tribes that gathered herbs, like the Oxhorn tribe, found their harvests diminished as plants and habitats were disturbed. The whole village grew uneasy and turned to the local office wizard for help. The assistant office's staff, however, were slow and evasive, promising only that they had reported the situation and were waiting for orders. That waiting proved disastrous. A maddened, stone-tusked boar, huge, heavy, and magically resilient, stormed out of the range and into a nearby Muggle town. It injured 8 people, nearly flattened 2 shops and several homes, and only fell after police backup used dozens of rounds. The boar's resistance made it newsworthy. The local police chief compared it to an armored vehicle. Hunters from afar arrived with rifles and dogs, eager for the glory of bagging such a beast. The ministry scrambled. Accidental magical reversal squads, memory modification teams, and Muggle witchcraft relations tried to contain the fallout. In the end, Muggle experts were brought in to explain it as a freak mutation, a 1-in-a-million anomaly, which barely calmed public curiosity. Science, at least the humankind, had to be believed. The incident led to criticism from higher-ups, who ordered the Assistant Management Office to get to the bottom of the disturbances and prevent further outbreaks. Hence the current investigations organized by the office with villagers in the mountains. But it had been over a week with nothing useful to show for it. The office's teams kept coming back with no answers. The situation remained tense, and the village sat on edge. "Monsters attacking the city?" Ted asked. "Didn't the Ministry of Magic send more people?" Miss Shilly shook her head. "The Assistant Management Office doesn't have many people, and I've heard the ministry has been tied up with other things lately. Other departments can't spare anyone either, so for now we have to handle it ourselves." Good heavens. All this talk about managing everything, and when trouble comes, it's suddenly nobody's responsibility? Ted didn't stay home waiting for Jerry, as Miss Shilly suggested. He said he'd never been to Dickamond and wanted to look around the village. Besides, with Jerry not home, it would be awkward to linger, so a walk made sense. He let Ansu fly free and watched the village from the bird's perspective as he strolled. European villages were spread out. Unlike the tightly packed courtyards back home, houses here were separated by 30 or 40 meters. This settlement sat in a mountain hollow, flanked by mountains on two sides and a slope on the other, so the terrain wasn't flat and the buildings were pleasingly scattered. Most of the houses looked only 8 to 10 years old and still felt new. The village seemed sparsely populated. After walking half a loop, he had only seen a few residents, mostly over 50. Two old men with dog-like ears eyed him warily and kept asking where he came from. Fortunately, Ted was young, presentable, and friendly. A few words eased their suspicion. An older woman with cat ears said nothing but stared at him, while a cat-eared little girl of 6 or 7 watched with wide curiosity until her grandmother gently held her back. Ted was still talking with the elders when a sudden clanging cut through the air. He looked up to see a bronze bell, maybe 50 centimeters across, ringing from the highest building. The note was loud and urgent. The whole village stiffened. Soon, demi-humans of various ages rushed from their houses with weapons in hand. Ansu swooped in and settled on Ted's shoulder, squawking, "A few beasts are rushing toward the village entrance. East! East!" The two dog-eared elders burst out of their homes again with a 2-foot steel fork and a spear and charged toward the eastern gate, howling. Ted followed immediately, wand already in hand. With the aid of greased souls, his speed was incredible. The old men only caught a glimpse of him as he vanished around a corner. They exchanged a look that plainly said, "Am I really this old?" Before Ted reached the gate, he could see, through Ansu's aerial view, what was bearing down on the village. 5 giant wild boars, not ordinary boars. Thick, pink fur covered their massive bodies, and several horizontal gashes along their backs pumped out scorching heat that warped the air. Each was about 4 meters long, nearly 3 meters tall, and easily weighed over 2 tons. The village entrance sat at the narrowest part of the hollow, about 50 meters wide, flanked by 3-meter-high log walls with a 3-meter-wide gate. If those boars slammed into it, the wall would not hold. Only 2 villagers stepped forward to meet the charge. A towering, bull-horned man over 2 meters tall, wielding a huge wooden hammer, its head 2 circles wider than a human skull and covered in rune-like patterns that sent shockwaves with every blow, and a lithe cat girl dancing between 2 boars with a pair of short, gleaming daggers. The daggers were too small to do serious harm, but her agility kept 2 of the beasts occupied. One of the boars had already struck the wall. With a sickening crack, 4 or 5 logs splintered and the gate shuddered. The boar staggered but steadied itself. Ted flicked his wand and sent a human head-sized, deep purple gravity sphere toward it. It moved slowly but arrived before the boar could strike again and hovered above the beast's back, reversing its gravitational pull. The boar's feet lost purchase and it flipped end over end, thrown into the air. When that 2-ton mass slammed down from 4 or 5 meters, the ground trembled and the other boars were momentarily stunned. Ted was already on top of the wooden wall. From 10 meters away, he could see the fallen boar clearly. Its pink fur was muddied, the horizontal stripes along its back glowing dark red like furnace coals, the heat bending the air around it. Its hooves were each larger than a human head, and flame-like orange-red markings ringed its eyes. In a fit of rage, it exhaled a blast of blistering steam. Ted quickly appraised the creature. Name: Flame-mutated whole-roasted pig classification. 3rd level magical beast, 2nd level flame mutation, 1st level gourmet monster attributes. Strength 15, Constitution 18, Agility 6, Intelligence 3, Perception 4, Spirit 4, Charm 5, Luck unknown. Talents: Magical beast green, +1 level magic, +1 level magic resistance. Flame mutation green, enhanced by fused flame magic, +3 levels flame resistance. Otherworldly creature green, origin from another world, exhibits abnormalities. Skills: Scorching Charge, rapid, high heat charge with massive impact but poor maneuverability. Scorching Body Temperature, abnormally high body temperature that does not harm itself and grants immunity to ordinary fire. Raging Inferno, when enraged, the body can temporarily become a giant fireball without burning itself. Evaluation: a mysterious creature from an unknown world, currently berserk for some inexplicable reason. A new magical beast, alarming name aside. Ted decided to test its limits. He extended his wand and called, "Ice!" A brilliant azure sphere shot out and struck the ground, erupting into a spray of ice spikes that froze the earth. The spell's range, however, was reduced, only 2/3 of its usual reach, because the 5 boars were radiating so much heat the ambient temperature had climbed by more than 10 degrees. The frost gripped half the flailing boar that was getting back up, but the ice began to steam and melt almost at once. Even so, the cold sapped the beast's vigor. Its body temperature dropped, and it visibly slowed. Ted sized the creature up. To fell something that large quickly, he'd need to hit a vital point with a lethal spell like Sectum Sempra. He couldn't take it down in 2 or 3 hits otherwise, so he decided to help the others holding the line instead. He raised his wand and barked, "Transfigure to mud." The spell struck the ground, and a broad area turned into a deep, sucking mud pit. One of the boars that had been chasing the cat girl plunged in headfirst and nearly submerged. But the mud itself immediately began to steam. The heat from the beasts was baking it, and it would likely harden and dry again within minutes. 205, Demi-Human Adventure Team, Wizard! The cat girl cried, staring at Ted perched on the wooden palisade. Ted waved a hand. "For the cats, my lady." Ted had just trapped one of the giant boars in a muddy pit when a new crisis struck. The leader, an even larger boar, her hide blazing red as if she'd been lit on fire, was charging straight at the ox-horned strongman standing nearby with his huge hammer. The strongman was incredibly broad and tall, his wooden hammer whistling through the air, but he looked dwarfed beside the massive boar, which resembled a little locomotive. A head-on collision would be like being hit by an 80-mile-an-hour truck. Death wasn't guaranteed, but losing half his life probably was. Despite her furious, clumsy appearance, the boar leader understood teamwork. As she charged, the 2 smaller boars flanked and attacked the strongman. He smashed them bloody with his hammer, but his focus shifted, and he no longer had time to dodge the leader rushing straight at him. He grit his teeth, raised his hammer, and prepared to trade blows. Ted muttered a spell so softly it was almost inaudible. Suddenly, a square block of earth rose between the strongman and the leader, 2 meters on a side, like a giant tile pushing up from the ground. The boar plunged into it, her head and forequarters embedded. The strongman struck the earth block with his hammer, creating a crater and stumbling back. Both were stopped. But the villagers' surprise deepened when the earth softened and flowed, then reformed into a solid, towering mud figure, the Earth Golem from Ted's blue card. Over 2 meters tall and just as wide, it was thick and sturdy, its lower body a surge of mud fused to the ground, providing a rock-solid base. Its upper body wrapped 2 massive arms, thicker than a grown man's waist, around the boar leader's neck and forelegs. Her short neck meant it didn't chop her head clean off, but the boar's head was plunged into the golem's body and her upper torso held fast, humiliated and helpless. Her rear legs dug furiously at the earth, but she couldn't break free. The 2 smaller boars watched, and their fur went green with fear. They squealed and rushed to help their leader, but the ox-horned strongman, battle-hardened, swung his hammer in a whirlwind hammer technique and blocked them. Having dealt with 3 already, controlling the remaining 2 was nothing for him. Ted's casual maneuver had flipped the battle. The older demi-humans in the village poured out, armed with swords, spears, axes, halberds, hooks, and forks, moving in small groups to encircle the boars. Their weapons might not have been enough to fell the monsters outright, but the sudden crowd and shouts unnerved the boars. What had been a terrifying charge became more like a hunt. Ted's volley of ice arrows killed the boar that had first broken through the wall. Its fiery red hide had cooled back to pink, and its body was riddled with a dozen fist-sized holes, blood frozen at the wounds. The second boar, already bound with ropes, had its skull split open by Ted's diffindo. The 2 remaining boars, bruised from hammer blows and faced with the leader captured, instantly realized things were hopeless. They abandoned their trapped companion and fled in different directions at top speed. When danger comes, even animals scatter. Ted watched as the 2 boars vanished a few dozen meters away and chose not to pursue them. 430 experience points apiece was tempting, but guarding the village was more important. With the threat gone, the ox-horned strongman put his hammer down and sighed with relief, sweat pouring off him within seconds. Ted leapt down from the 2 to 3 meter wall and hurried to the earth golem still holding the boar leader. He held his wand to the boar's ear. Heat rose off her in waves, steam already hissing from the golem, If he waited another minute or two, the mud's water would be baked dry. Ted fired an intensified ice arrow straight into the boar's ear canal, aiming for the vital spot. The shot worked. The boar convulsed wildly, her hips and hind legs kicking high, then went limp. Her brain was destroyed in an instant. Ding. Mission Defend Dicamond completed. Reward 300 experience points, 100 Dicamande reputation points. Card Boar Charge green, the system chimed. Ted's fingers twitched, and an invisible mage hand pulled the two dropped cards into his palm. The villagers looked at him with a mix of awe and gratitude. They had always known magic was powerful, but seeing it up close changed everything. The cat girl and the ox-horned strongman, both fighters, appreciated that Ted's skill far exceeded that of an ordinary wizard. When they learned he was Jerry's classmate, their surprise grew. Were Hogwarts students really that strong? Ted became an honored guest of the village, escorted back amid cheers. Adults and children gathered around. It felt like a festival, only they were slaughtering boars for meat. In the end, from the monster siege, Ted had claimed 3 cards. Flame Enhancement, green. Material card, enhances a magical creature or magical item with flame. Note, conflicting attributes can cause the enhancement to fail or even inflict serious damage. Ignite, green. Spell card passive, causes a powerful explosive combustion upon death. Note, can only be used once in a lifetime. Boar Charge. Spell card usage, perform a furious, unstoppable boar-like charge. Note, consumes a large amount of stamina. By evening, as the sun began to kiss the western mountains, the scouting parties returned. They had gone up into the nearby hills at the instruction of the Ministry of Magic's Assistant Management Office to investigate the situation there. Coming home to find their village nearly ambushed left them shaken. "Damn those ministry wizards," one young demi-human grumbled. "They sent us out to search, and we found nothing. Then our village almost got destroyed. I'm never going again." Many of the young adults were angry. 2 wizards in their 20s looked embarrassed. Clearly, they'd been made scapegoats, sent to do a thankless job while their elders avoided the trouble. Jerry and his group returned soon after. Ted had already seen them through Ansu's eyes. Jerry's party included Gufu of the Oxhorn tribe, Yetcha of the Dog-Ear tribe, a year above Ted, Caitlin of the Cat-Ear tribe, and a burly rat-ear youth nearly as big as Gufu who resembled Jerry, apparently Jerry's cousin. There were 2 other rat-ear youngsters, a girl around Jerry's age, and a small boy of 7 or 8. Jerry ran straight up to Ted, relieved. "Ted, you're here. Thank you for saving the village. If you hadn't come, I don't want to think what would have happened." They stood among the boars being butchered and cut up. Even with the whole village armed, it was hard to guess what losses they might have suffered. Jerry laughed and slapped Ted on the back. "Merlin's flowery shorts. Thank him for his guidance." Hogwarts students often invoked Merlin without much reverence. Jerry introduced his friends. Ted already knew Gufu. The group of 6 had grown close because of Neville. Yetcha and Caitlin were Gryffindor second years who had grown up with Jerry. The burly rat-ear, Masal, was indeed Jerry's cousin. An unusual mutation after arriving in this world had made him massive and powerful, bulkier than many Oxhorn warriors. The rat-ear girl Sherry was Jerry's childhood sweetheart. The little boy was Jerry's grandnephew Taffy. After greetings, Ted took Jerry and his companions over to speak with the 2 young staffers from the Assistant Management Office. "Hello, I'm Ted Epiphany, a student from Hogwarts," he said. "My raven followed the 2 escaped boars and tracked them. They ran southwest. You should notify the Ministry of Magic's department for the regulation and control of magical creatures right away. If they reach Muggle areas, there could be real trouble." The 2 staffers scrambled to contact their superiors. Ted told Jerry quietly, "I had Ansu follow them. It looks like an accident. There was no sign of deliberate mischief." "That's a relief," Jerry said. "There's already been too much bad news lately. Thanks to book friend, tale number 2302 for the reward." That evening, Ted was still a guest at Jerry's house. After a hearty, lively dinner with the villagers, urgent news arrived from the Ministry of Magic. The ministry was stretched thin, so short-staffed that even the 2 remaining interns were being reassigned. Near Edinburgh, something huge and otherworldly had appeared. A 5-meter-long magical creature had wandered right to the city's edge, damaging 6 houses, killing 8 people, and injuring a dozen more. It had ripped up a whole stretch of street. The Muggle Prime Minister was reportedly furious and had threatened to use troops. The ministry had pulled almost every Auror and specialist it could spare to deal with the aftermath, cutting off communications, placating Muggles, erasing memories, repairing buildings. But the dead couldn't be brought back. Since Voldemort's fall, the unwritten rule had held: Muggles must not be killed in public, where the existence of magic could be exposed. If word leaked, the International Confederation of Wizards could intervene, and multiple ministries might launch a joint investigation. Now, a monstrous being had appeared out of nowhere at a city edge and caused mass casualties. The ministry's response had been slow. By the time Aurors reached the scene, local police had already been firing at the creature for several minutes. "Those Muggle guns didn't even touch it," one young assistant from the ministry said. "They couldn't penetrate its hide. Even the first Auror team didn't find a good solution. It has extreme magic resistance. Spells barely slow it. It's like a dragon on the ground." He looked contrite. "I'm sorry, but we have to send people there now. You'll have to manage here for a while." A burly man with a weathered, horn-like curl to his hair, so solid and rough he made a good first impression, put a hand on the assistant's shoulder. "Andrew, don't beat yourself up. This isn't your fault. Go do your duty. Stay safe." The reassurance eased the young man. The burly man, who the village treated as their chief, though no such title existed officially in Decamond, was outwardly gruff, but careful and considerate. Ted was worried about the Edinburgh incident and wanted to contact Weasley or Harry, but they were far away. Even flying would take hours. Communication was inconvenient. How he wished for something as simple as a message app. That night, Ted stayed at Jerry's. Around Decamond, the adult subhumans kept watch on the wooden palisade. They slept little. The night was restless. From the distant mountains and forests, all kinds of beasts and magical creatures were running, some seemingly panicked and heading straight for the village, others trying to flee farther away. The guards fired a dozen warning rockets to scatter the herds. Everyone felt uneasy. Whatever had happened in the mountains had disturbed the ecosystem and driven animals out in a panic. The villagers debated defense plans: go deeper to investigate, strengthen the walls, set up outposts, or prepare an emergency evacuation. After 10 years of hard work here, no one wanted to abandon their homes unless they absolutely had to. Ted sat on a stone pier at the edge of the village square, listening to the discussions and thinking. His task prompt then pinged up in his head. Task triggered. Explore Mountain Anomaly, blue. The Misty Mountains are vast, rich with rare herbs and magical creatures. Something strange has appeared there and now threatens the subhuman village. Objective: investigate the anomaly in the mountains. Reward: 550 experience, 200 reputation with Decamond Village. Card: Mountain Peak, blue. The twilight deepens and the distant peaks tremble. There must be a cause for the fear of 100 beasts. The villagers couldn't agree on one course. Some wanted a reconnaissance party to enter the mountains. Others argued defenses needed bolstering. A few pushed for a wider perimeter of lookouts. The most pessimistic prepared for an evacuation at any moment. Jerry looked gloomy. Facing an unknown danger, he felt helpless. He turned to Ted. "Ted, what do you think we should do?" Ted glanced at the map Jerry kept and whispered, "I'll go into the mountains to investigate. Do you have a map of the area?" Jerry was surprised, but not shocked. He led Ted to his room and pulled a leather map from a box under the bed. It showed the local terrain and the routes their scouts had been using in recent days. "Which direction were you thinking?" Ted pointed to a spot. "Let's start here." They tried to slip away quietly, but their plan had been noticed. From behind a nearby wall, a familiar voice popped up. "Jerry, where are you going?" Ted and Jerry froze. Ted was startled because the rat-eared girl, Sherry, had appeared within about 12 meters, right on the edge of his perception range. Jerry gave an embarrassed smile. "You found us again." Sherry, a member of the rat-ear tribe, had never formally awakened magic to become a wizard, but she was a master of natural stealth. Jerry was already a skilled night tracker in his own right, able to move unseen around the village for years without detection. But Sherry made him look clumsy. Reluctantly, Jerry told her their plan. Sherry insisted on coming along. Ted hesitated. If there was real danger, his current strength would allow him to escape with Jerry without trouble. Adding another person could complicate things, but Sherry's expression made it hard to refuse. With a casual flick, she produced a dagger seemingly out of nothing. "Don't underestimate me," she said. Jerry vouchsafed, "Sherry's a strong fighter, great at sneak attacks, catching people off guard." Ted said, "Excuse me," and used appraisal. The little diagnostic confirmed what Jerry had just said. Sherry was not weak. Sherry, Ratier Tribe, subhuman. Level 5 rogue, level 1 dark assassin. Ted's mouth twitched. She was actually level 5, much higher than Jerry's level 3. It helped explain why she'd been able to tail them so precisely. As for Ted himself, he'd spent experience earlier in the holiday to level up. To raise the wizard profession from level 6 to level 7 required 21,000 XP. After the reduction from his study god talent, he needed 18,500. He'd put an attribute point into spirit and a skill point into magic, bringing his magic skill to level 7. The temporary wand boost he'd enjoyed had just expired. Cedar wood with a phoenix feather core had reached its limit, but the pseudo-philosopher's stone still gave him a +2 magic level bonus. That left his effective magic at level 9. At 13 years old, with that much raw magical power, comparable to a top tutor's level, many strong spells were available to him. Spells he had previously been unable to master, like third-level D&D equivalents, he now cast reliably. Alchemical items he'd prepared also covered many defensive contingencies. Sherry saw his glance and grinned. "You're worrying too much. I know how to stay silent." Jerry's shoulders relaxed a little. The three of them stood there under the deepening twilight, a tense, unlikely team. Ted, the powerful young wizard, Jerry, the stalwart village scout, and Sherry, the stealthy Ratier rogue, about to head into the misty mountains where something had stirred the beasts into panic. 207. Misty Forest Dire Beast. It turned out that subhumans weren't entirely without inheritance. Although most of their children lacked the talent to become wizards, they still retained something of their race. Sherry, for example, had been receiving special training since childhood, level 6 at 13, specializing in stealth and sneak attacks. What were you rat-eared folk planning to do with her? After lunch, the three of them left the village quietly. Sherry knew a secret passage out, a truly hidden, very narrow tunnel that left Ted covered in dirt, while Jerry and Sherry slipped through comfortably. Fortunately, Ted could use Axio. Without it, he would have been in a sorry state. He pulled several potions from his spatial bag. This red one heals internal and external injuries. This green one neutralizes low-level toxins. You don't need the blue one. It's for Jerry, he told Sherry. She just warned him he might get stuck in the tunnel, and now she was getting her revenge. After distributing the potions, Ted sent Ansu up to scout, and the three moved cautiously into the forest. Beyond a rugged mountain range lay a vast wood at the mountain's base. It was mid-July. The vegetation was lush. Mist rises here in the mornings and evenings, Jerry explained. They call it Thin Mist Forest. Muggles used to come exploring, but people kept getting lost. Eventually, nobody went anymore. Sherry scoffed. It's all the Ministry of Magic stirring things up. Some big confundus for Muggles. With little human influence, wild creatures were abundant in the Thin Mist Forest, but something was wrong. Ted watched a snake and a rabbit fleeing side by side. Ansu reported that the birds had mostly flown away. Even insects scurried in a panic. Whatever had driven the wildlife out had done it thoroughly. Sherry twitched her nose and snapped. "Careful, something's coming." Ansu, circling above, had already spotted it. A strange animal, a bit larger than a big dog, more like an Alaskan Malamute in size. Its body, tapered at the front and broadened at the rear, covered in black fur with white striped spots, and its fangs were ridiculously long. It looked furious. Fierce Badger, Berserk Beast, level 6. This badger bore no magic, it was a Zerk mutation. These Berserk beasts had begun appearing sporadically over 10 years ago. Muggle newspapers once reported many animal attacks, and hunting frenzies followed. Despite its lack of magic, this badger had reached level 6 through sheer berserk ferocity, almost on par with an acromantula. It was shredding a stag, not for food, but for the pleasure of violence. The deer's neck was nearly severed as blood spurted everywhere. Ted was about to tell Sherry to hide. He wasn't worried about Jerry, who was cunning and would have concealed himself, when he realized Sherry was even more nimble. Jerry slipped back behind a large tree. Sherry raced up the trunk as if she had claws. She scampered up hand over hand as if running on flat ground. Ted stared. "So you're a squirrel person." With his teammates safe, Ted strode forward. The badger had already noticed him from 20 meters away. It glanced at him, gave a guttural shriek, and charged, mouth wide, aiming to bite him in two. From behind another tree, Jerry had aimed and fired a stunning spell. The beast's speed slowed wildly, movements turning sluggish, as if in slow motion. Simultaneously, a 20-centimeter crossbow bolt shot from the tree and buried itself in one of the badger's eyes. If the badger hadn't nicked its head at the last instant to deflect the blow, the bolt might have gone straight through the brain. The bolt stuck in the eye socket, and blood gushed. But the creature did not back down. Wounded, it only grew more ferocious. Its body swelled as if fueled by rage. Saliva dripped from its jaws, and even the stunning spell couldn't keep it down. It lunged again. Ted didn't hesitate. He made a claw shape with his left hand and lifted. The badger abruptly felt itself gripped by an invisible giant hand, hoisted into the air, then slammed against a nearby tree with a motion Ted had developed from the Weasley twins' tricks. Mage hand, modified. The tree trunk, as thick as a barrel, shuddered. The badger thudded to the ground and lay there spitting blood. Its vitality, however, was appalling. It struggled to its feet, eyes bloodshot and unbaited. Ted didn't toy with it. He raised his left hand again and flicked his wand with his right. An invisible blade sliced the badger's neck cleanly. There was no time for it to dodge in midair. 550 experience points. If he'd had no teammates helping, it would have been 600. Material card. Material, fierce green. Jerry stepped out and said, "You're still efficient. Once our group met a fierce beast smaller than this, and it took over 10 minutes to kill. They really don't fear death." Sherry dropped down from the tree, eyes wide with surprise as she watched Ted. Jerry had told her Ted wasn't an ordinary wizard, but this display exceeded expectations. Could it really be that effortless? They pressed on. Soon they ran into a pack of forest wolves, 7 or 8 strong, large and powerfully built. The alpha bore a white crescent mark on its chest and looked magnificent. The alpha was sensible. It halted the others with a howl, and the pack cautiously bypassed the trio and slipped away. Ted and his companions weren't wanton killers, so they let them go. A little later, they met a giant bear whose fur looked singed, blackened as if scorched, with burn marks that still smoldered green. One eye was blind, a red-hot ember set into its face. Half its muzzle had been burned away. Green smoke seeped from its body as if it were perpetually aflame. Ted appraised it. Scorching brown bear. Level 7 mutated beast. Level 1 fire erosion. Level 1 magical creature. Driven mad by fire magic and unending pain, the bear had been rampaging, tearing down trees. When it saw them, it attacked with even more fury. The three had no choice but to fight. The beast's vitality was terrifying. Its neck was thick and tenacious. It took several Sectum Sempra spells for Ted to finally sever its head. Its blood seethed and steamed in the midsummer air like boiling water. The 922 experience points. Material card. Jerry consulted the map. "Less than 2 miles and we'll be out of the thin mist forest," he said. They emerged in under 2 hours, largely because Ted's combat power let them go straight through the wood, dispatching any crazed beasts in minutes. For Jerry and his friends before, the same route would have taken 6 or 7 hours. Beyond the forest lay Flood Peak River Valley, a low-lying area that flooded in the rainy season, with riverbanks strewn with pebbles. Since this was posted a night early, please accept my belated wishes. Happy Dragon Boat Festival to everyone. Standing at the forest's edge, the three looked down into the river valley below. The terrain dropped away like a cliff. A 10 to 12 meter high rock wall fell into a broad valley dotted with pebbles, where several small streams wound together into a single river 6 or 7 meters across. "I heard Uncle Doug from the dog-eared tribe say you sometimes run into magical creatures from the Mist Mountains down in that valley," Jerry said. Sherry nodded. "Magical creatures are worth a fortune." Ted glanced at her. Whenever she had free time, she went gathering herbs. She never missed an opportunity to make money. Has anything unusual happened here? He asked. Sherry shook her head. It's strange. At this time of year, the valley shouldn't be this quiet. We've been watching for a while and haven't seen a single animal come to drink. Ted sent Ansu up to scout. The bird rose into the sky and swept its gaze over the valley. As Ted suspected, Ansu found something. A few minutes later, it sent a signal, and Ted linked into its vision and froze. A group of humanoid scavengers crouched in the river valley, about 1.6 to 1.7 meters tall, hunched and powerfully built, covered in mottled fur with jackal-like heads. Jackalweir. Any organized, humanoid, otherworldly species like this drew the attention of every Ministry of Magic. Merfolk, kobolds, every race had been logged and investigated. Where a lair or gathering was found, official wizard teams were often dispatched to clear them out. Such creatures were dangerous, aggressive, and often organized killers. Ted recalled Arthur Weasley mentioning that the British Ministry even had special cleanser squads, elite hit wizards, to eradicate these threats when they appeared. Jackalweir were particularly notorious. 8 years ago, a band had turned up in Northern Ireland and slaughtered a small town overnight, leaving over 100 dead. The Ministry's rules even allowed wizards to kill creatures like Jackalweir on sight. In Ansu's feed, the Jackalweir were in the middle of an ambush. A herd of deer had spilled out of the mountains and run into a narrow spot with water on one side and a rock wall on the other. The lead stag was a striking white with black spots and magnificent antlers that shimmered with a faint green glow. 4 or 5 Jackalweir had met it head-on, while 2 or 3 others rushed into the panicked herd, hacking it down with crude machetes. "Ansu, help!" Ted ordered, cutting the feed. "We're moving. Enemies." Ted and Jerry were both wizards. They had ways to travel fast. In less than 5 minutes, they arrived at the riverbank. Ansu perched on a large rock, preening its feathers as if nothing had happened. 8 Jackalweir lay nearby, motionless, eyes wide and glazed. They were not dead, but in a deep coma, neatly incapacitated by Ansu. Despite its appearance, Ansu was no ordinary bird. If judged by power, it would rank at least level 10. It had used its mind-based illusions with deadly efficiency against creatures that relied on brute force and simple instincts. The white stag stood protectively in front of the injured herd, watching Ted and the others with wary intelligence. Ted stepped forward and put his hands up. "We mean no harm. I can help treat your wounds, and then you can continue on." Ted's Mind Mage rank hadn't risen in the past year, but his mastery had deepened. He had honed his mental techniques, and his initial skill, Charm Art, now worked reliably to induce goodwill in other creatures. With Ansu's presence and Ted's calming influence, the big white stag relaxed enough to allow help. Ted applied white essence to more than a dozen surviving deer to staunch bleeding, reduce inflammation, and speed healing. The stag gave a few low cries, and then, understanding there was danger deeper in the mountains, led the herd away. Ansu translated the animal's emotions. Something terrifying had appeared in the mountains, and everything was fleeing. Instead of following the animals into the mountains, the 3 set about investigating the Jackalweir. Ted laid a hand on the forehead of one of the fallen humanoids and probed its memories. These creatures were little more than animals in crude leather armor, smelled worse than a dirty kennel, fishy and foul enough to make his head ache. Their intelligence was low and their memories blurred, but what Ted found was enough. He finished searching, then cleansed his hands with an aguamenti charm and used Sectum Sempra to end the unconscious Jackalweir's lives. They were wild monsters of level 5 to level 7, each worth 300 to 600 experience. The entire encounter yielded a total of 3,245 experience points and 3 cards: Bestiality, Rusty Mishimishidi, gray, and Tiger's Eye Stone, green. Ted was puzzled and concerned. The Hongfeng River Valley hadn't seen Jackalweir in the past decade. Where had these come from? If the cause wasn't found, Daikamond Village, only about 20 kilometers in a straight line, could be in serious danger. Rugged terrain made that journey 10 hours on foot, but Jackalweir behaved more like beasts. They ran fast and were ruthless. If they discovered the village, they could probably reach it in 4 or 5 hours. Sherry, who often hunted with the village team and had faced water ghouls and kobolds, looked grim. She had little experience with Jackalweir, but knew enough to be wary. A quest pinged into Ted's mind. Quest triggered. Mysterious Jackalwere. The Hongfeng River Valley has not seen Jackalwere in the past decade, yet you've encountered a sizable group. If their origin is not clarified, you won't be able to sleep. Objective: find out where these Jackalwere came from and how many there are. Reward: 300 experience points. Jackalwere Hog. Why did several Jackalwere die on the riverbank? Why did the mysterious white deer flee in terror? Why is the demi-human village losing sleep at night? Is this a corruption of nature or a breakdown of morality? Tune in to the Jackalwere of Hongfeng River Valley. Ted grinned despite the tension. Massive experience, a clear quest, and the chance to prevent a disaster for Decamond. There was no way they could ignore it. From the hazy memories he'd recovered, Ted discerned that this was a temporary Jackalwere encampment, neither tiny nor huge. Jackalwere couldn't count precisely, but based on mealtime recollections, he estimated between 60 and 100 members. The memories weren't specific enough to give exact coordinates, only a general direction. All three looked to Ansu. The bird grumbled, but set off. 10 minutes later, Ansu sent another signal. It had found them. A makeshift shantytown built against a mountain slope, apparently erected recently. Several heavily hunched Jackalwere stood guard, swaying unsteadily. One could even say they knew how to stand watch. That was worrying. The knoll camp looked like a crude mountain stronghold, a hastily built wooden fort pressed against the rock. It sat on high ground, accessible only by a steep, narrow trail clinging to the mountainside. Two filthy, disheveled Jackalweres stood on guard at the gate. Jerry and Sherry stared at the rough palisade, logs not even debarked, and both blinked in disbelief. "This is a proper stronghold," Sherry whispered. "When did Jackalweres learn military strategy? This world just keeps getting stranger." "The location's too dangerous to approach directly," she added. "If those two have any senses at all, getting past them will be impossible. Should we wait until night and try to sneak in?" Jerry smiled at her. "Don't forget, Ted and I are wizards." Sherry rolled her eyes. "So, what's so great about being a wizard?" Jerry shrugged. "Ted, how about you handle the disillusionment charm later? I'm not confident enough with it for something like this. If it fails at a critical moment, this isn't like dealing with Filch." Jerry's talents were more about nimble feet and improvisation than powerful, reliable magic. He'd learned the disillusionment charm, but didn't want to gamble his skill on a mission this serious. It was safer to let Ted take responsibility. Ted nodded. "I'll do it when the time comes. But let Ansu scout the inside first." Ansu gave an exaggerated sigh. Clearly the team would fall apart without him, and spread his wings. He circled the cliff twice, then settled on a secluded ledge and peered into the stronghold to observe. Ted didn't just stand idly by. He tapped an egg-sized pokeball against the ground. When it hit with a soft thump, a small white mouse appeared, Rat Brother, who immediately stood on his hind legs and looked left and right as if assessing the situation. Sherry leaned forward, eager to pet the curious creature, but the rat shied and darted to hide behind Ted's leg. "Go check it out," Ted whispered, pointing toward the camp. Rat Brother shot toward the stronghold like a streak, almost teleporting. Ted closed one eye and tapped into the senses of Ansu and Rat Brother, drawing their views into his mind. Ding! Le Bukasi Knoll Camp discovered. Quest completed. Mysterious Jackalwere. Reward, 300 XP. Card, Jackalwere Hog. Ding. Quest chain triggered. Le Bukasi Knoll Camp. You have found the Jackalwere encampment, a large force occupying a strategic position. This is a severe threat to Decamond Village. Objective, destroy Le Bukasi Knoll Camp. Eliminate as many Jackalweres as possible. Reward, 780 XP, 3 random cards. If the Jackalweres are allowed to establish themselves, nothing within 20 kilometers will be safe. Ted hadn't expected the discovery to kick off a quest chain. He read the notification with a little frown. Organized or not, Jackalweres were still brutal, dim-witted creatures, but the camp state suggested something more. Someone with intelligence had to be directing them. From their vantage point, the camp inside the ramparts was a stinking mess. Gnawed bones and rotting meat stacked in corners, blood and entrails, filth everywhere. Some creatures sprawled asleep, others snarled and fought, sword blow and tooth aimed genuinely at one another. Spectators howled and cheered like deranged hyenas. Then a much larger jackalweir, flanked by two even tougher-looking brutes, stomped over and booted the fighters aside. The two combatants, covered in blood, shrank back and cowered, clearly fearful of an internal hierarchy. There was a chieftain, at least, capable of keeping the pack from devouring itself. But the thing that made Ted uneasy was hinted at in scattered memories and the order the camp displayed. A shaman, a jackalweir shaman, someone who could cast spells, explained how these recently arrived creatures had managed, in fewer than 10 days, to seize this strongpoint and set up a functioning camp. For wizards, mundane foes were manageable, but spellcasters were a different problem. If there was a shaman here, they needed to find and neutralize it, ideally by surprise. Rat Brothers slipped through the refuse and headed for a cave bored into the mountainside. The side into the rock was noticeably cleaner. The pack apparently respected that area. Two tall jackalweir raiders, the same ones who had accompanied the chieftain, stood guard at the cave mouth. Ted evaluated them by feeling their presence through Rat Brothers' senses, level 7 and level 8. The mouse peered out from behind a log and froze. Rat-sized reconnaissance had limits. Jackalweirs had an acute sense of smell, and Rat Brother dared not get too close. This was the moment for Ansu. With a wingspan of 1.5 meters, Ansu swept low over the raiders with a rushing whoosh, talons flashing. The two guards yelped and howled, wildly chopping at the air with their big cleavers as if to strike the sky. They chased after the bird thing and were driven off, which gave Rat Brother the opening to slip unseen into the cave. Ted, still linked to the rat's viewpoint, peered through a very low angle into the cavern. It wasn't pitch black, torches lit the interior, and surprisingly the cave was clean. There were no scattered bones, no furs slung everywhere, no dung, only slightly stale air and an unexpected tidiness, almost like a corridor in a school. After 7 or 8 meters, the space widened, and crude murals appeared on the stone, murals painted with mineral pigments and plant dyes, primitive but purposeful. The scenes were brutal. Packs of jackalweirs slaughtering all manner of prey, including humanoid captives, as sacrifices. At the center of one mural towered a towering god, 10 times the height of a jackalweir, with a jackal-like head but a body covered in bone spurs, hooked claws, scales, and 4 arms wielding strange, bloody weapons. Rat Brother only needed a glance. He trembled, frozen with fear, then burrowed closer to Ted's mental line. Ted used a gentle touch of mind power to calm him and urged the little spy onward. They moved deeper and found a small stone chamber. In it sat a hunched, ancient were-creature, clearly the shaman, robed in dirty leather stitched from scraps. Its muzzle was grizzled, the fur around its mouth yellowed and matted. Its teeth were worn to stubs, patches of black and yellow skin showed where fur had fallen out. The creature rocked slightly, making soft, dog-like whimpers, utterly absorbed in its ritual. A low altar stood about 1 meter in front of it. Crude stone piled with skulls, bundles of herbs, strips of hide, bowls of dried blood, and a jagged sacrificial blade stained dark. On the altar sat an effigy roughly the size of a jackalweir, built from charred wood and bones, bound with sinew and hide, with black stones for eyes and animal teeth set into its maw. It depicted the 4-armed jackal god from the mural, staring blankly from its gruesome pedestal, receiving the shaman's offerings. Ted's scalp prickled. This was the focus of whatever power had corralled and driven these beasts. If they could take this shaman by surprise, they might cut the head off what kept the camp together. But there was no time for heroics yet. First, they needed a plan. Chapter 210, Red Quest, Jackalweir Priest Alkin. From the memories Ted had pulled from the jackalweir's minds, they'd only been in this strange place for less than 10 days. Building a rudimentary camp with wooden palisades in that time was impressive enough. Even more alarming was the small altar set up in the center, dedicated to some unknown, twisted deity. Ted decided it couldn't be any normal god. Its form was all wrong, and it definitely didn't belong to this world. If it was left to fester for months, who knew what would happen? When he first heard about the convergence of the stars, his worst fear had been a breach by something like the Burning Legion or warp demons. Now that threat suddenly felt much closer. Ding! Quest triggered. Clear the danger. A dangerous individual from another world cannot be allowed to cause trouble here. Objective: kill the jackalweir priest Alkin. Reward: 1800 experience. Card, Mist of Fate. He's the first, but he won't be the last. We need to be prepared. There's a spellcaster among these jackal-weirs, Ted told Jerry and Sherry. A spellcaster? They both echoed. Ted quickly laid out what he'd learned. There were at least 70 or 80 jackal-weirs in the camp, plus an unknown spellcaster, and some kind of otherworldly jackal cult. They had to be wiped out before it grew. Ted picked a downwind spot, unpacked his cauldron and the array of potions he carried, and waited. Ansu slipped into the camp like a shadow and landed beside a small pool of filthy water, the camp's water source. To most people, it would have been undrinkable. To a jackal-weir, it was fine. Most brutes would have camped by a river and slept with just a lean-to, but these jackal-weirs had been led by an experienced commander. They'd built a proper camp and kept a controlled water supply. That made things easier for Ted. Ansu poured a small jar of pale green liquid into the pool. The water was already foul, so the potion diluted without looking unusual. Ted's concoction wasn't instant or lethal. He'd picked up Snape's knack for delayed, subtle poisons. He called this blend 10 fragrance softening powder. It caused a slowed, weakening effect, something like -2 strength and a quarter loss of stamina, but it didn't wash out. One jar would be enough for 70 or 80 jackal-weirs. The only worry was the jackal-weir spellcaster. He'd been chanting in the cave for over an hour without moving. He probably wouldn't drink from the common pool. The hyenas the jackal-weirs had brought with them had all died on arrival, which made the plan simpler. Otherwise, animals might have complicated things. While they waited for the potion to work, Ted assigned roles. He would be the main attacker. Jerry and Sherry would set fires. Kill and burn. Once the camp was on fire, the slaughter would be much easier. About 20 minutes later, one by one, the jackal-weirs came to the pool. There was a hierarchy. The biggest, fiercest ones drank first, burying their muzzles and gulping greedily, even rubbing the water over their faces. The rest followed. Ted worried. Their crude way of drinking suggested a decent natural resistance to toxins, but the powder had been designed for this. Around 3 or 4 in the afternoon, after the blistering sun had sapped them, the jackal-weirs dozed in the shade. The spellcaster in the cave was still performing his ritual, oblivious. "It's almost time," Ted told Jerry and Sherry. Ted cast invisible safety helmet charms on both of them, then the 3 of them moved up the mountain path. They froze when they were about 10 meters from the gate. The jackal-weirs' noses were keen, and the 2 gate guards were still slumped in the shadows, freshly drunk from the tainted water. Ted took a chance. He waved his hand, and a huge jackal-weir materialized on the path. Summon card, Jackal-weir Hog, green. Summon Jackal-weir Hog to fight for you. Duration, 15 minutes. Cooldown, 12 hours. Note, Grandpa Hog has slaughtered hundreds of thousands of noobs. He's vicious. The card was special. It even had a name. Unlike some summons, Hog felt like an elite. He was roughly 1.8 meters tall, hunched in the jackal style, heavily muscled with thick arms and legs. A steel bristle mane ran from the back of his head down his spine, black and glossy, his brown-black stripes like a blur when he moved. A one-handed short chain hammer hung in a massive hand. His maw gaped, fangs long and thick, and he fixed the gate guards with a predatory stare. Ted checked Hog's stats. Level 7 jackal-weir. Strength 7, Constitution 8, Agility 6, Intelligence 5, Perception 6, Spirit 4, Charisma 4. Talents: Cunning, green, smarter than most jackal-weirs, and ferocious, green, a bloodthirsty fighter who grows stronger in battle. Equipment: light leather armor, heavy chain hammer. Skills included Terrifying Howl 2, Bite Eye, Claw Attack 1, Chain Hammer Mastery 1, Sprint Charge Eye, Headbutt Eye. Hog's presence hit the 2 gate guards like a vengeful god. They smelled something unfamiliar and felt a cold fear. The sight of a ferocious member of their own kind staring them down was enough. They shrank into themselves. "Who is this?" one of them whimpered. "I don't know him. His scent's wrong." "So fierce," the other managed. "So cruel, so strong, so terrifying." Hog roared, a deep, rolling challenge. "Woo, woo!" The 2 guards immediately cowered, whimpering and cackling with nervous fear. With that, Grandpa Hog swaggered into the camp as if he owned it. The guards dared not question him. They were relieved they hadn't been the ones to draw his anger. Ted, Jerry, and Sherry slipped up onto the wooden wall and melted into a shadowed corner. The camp smelled of blood and filth. Sherry clapped her hand over her nose and mouth. Ted muttered and tweaked the safety helmet charm to add an air filtration effect. "Wizards aren't so useless after all," Sherry said, half amazed. Hog stalked to the center of the camp and planted himself before the tall Jackalware chieftain nearby. He let out a series of harsh, triumphant barks and snarls, a clear challenge. "I challenge you," Hog growled, baring teeth and cracking his chain hammer on his shoulder. The camp went silent in the charged moment, and Ted readied himself for whatever came next. 211. Master Hog wants to fight you. That Jackalware chieftain used to be near the bottom of the food chain on the continent of Enroth. Like the dozens of Jackalware under his command, he had been cannon fodder for heroes. Then, some time ago, no one could say exactly when, he couldn't count and didn't remember, the night battle raged and the ground suddenly convulsed. Even mighty dragons and archangels on the other side, not to mention minotaurs and giant dragonflies, panicked in the earthquake. When dawn came, they found themselves in an unfamiliar world. The good news, it was sunny, prey was abundant, and the wild beasts were weak and easy to catch. The bad news, his pack ran into an old werewolf. In a normal Jackalware gathering, an old werewolf like that would be left to fend for himself when food was plentiful. When food was scarce, though, a bit of tough meat was no problem if it filled the belly. Jackalware had no concept of family or kinship. They showed no pity or mercy. Savagery and brutality ran in their veins. Their nature matched their appearance, beast more than person. But this old werewolf was unusual. He knew magic. He beat the chieftain badly and subjugated the whole troop. The chieftain thought, could this old fellow be a male wizard? Losing to a powerful one wasn't shameful. Following strength was an honor. But the old werewolf wasn't a male wizard. He introduced himself as Alkin, a priest. From then on, things were simple. Alkin, also new to this world, subdued a band of Jackalware from another world, led them to build a camp, and made a small altar to pray to his god. He had been praying for 3 or 4 days and refused to leave the cave. At first, the chieftain enjoyed it. He no longer had to be cannon fodder. And since the old one didn't interfere, wasn't he the boss now? When had he ever had such an experience? It was glorious. But just as he was luxuriating in his new status, a reckless clansman stepped forward to challenge him. Madness, a death wish. For Jackalware, resemblance was enough to make them enemies. If this one challenged him, he could not refuse. Fight! Kill! Both sides took their places in the center of the camp. The chieftain held a short-handled axe. Hog wielded a flail. The challenger was a bit bigger than Hog. The Jackalware, who had been lying about like corpses, immediately gathered. This was a fight for leadership. Minutes later, the whole camp had encircled them. Jerry and Sherry started to move too. Ansu and Rat Brother began to stir. Hog and the chieftain glared, howled in unison, and charged. Hog's skill, terrifying howl, didn't just make noise, it intimidated an opponent's spirit and crushed their courage. That single roar made the watching Jackalware shrink back. The chieftain took the full force of it. He felt a bang in his ears and a skip at his heart, his movements growing sluggish and stiff. He ignored it. Reckless fool, he thought. And loud, too. The next second, the flail and the hand axe met with a crash and sparks. Hog's weapon had a slight advantage, a short handle connected by chain to a hammerhead studded with irregular spikes, so it absorbed recoil and didn't jar his grip. But the opposing chieftain was no pushover, higher level, stronger. Though affected by the howl and at a weapon disadvantage, he didn't break in the collision. The two powerful Jackalware tore into each other. The rusted axe sliced the air, the heavy flail whistled. They exchanged brutal blows and ragged scratches. The chieftain's hook-like claws left bloody rips. Hog had leather armor. The opponent wore only a filthy, tattered hide that tore in a few blows. Hog's armor took countless claw marks and blocked many attacks, even the grazing axe. Still, Hog was at a disadvantage. The chieftain was faster and more brutal, willing to trade hits and overwhelm with superior strength. A minute in, both were wounded. Another minute, and both were soaked in blood. Foul gore splattered and dripped from their weapons, an ugly, savage scene. Hog's fighting will was exceptional. His experience and cunning helped him endure. If his opponent had had similar experience and equipment, Hog would have died long ago. Meanwhile, Ted quietly bolstered Hog with magic. enlarge person, shield. With Ted's covert aid, Hog stabilized and began to counterattack. At the same time, Jerry and Sherry found their cues. Sherry produced the igniting oil Ted had given her, an essence refined from petroleum mixed with volcanic magic crystal powder. Once ignited, it burned ferociously and couldn't be put out with water, perfect for murder, arson, and covert sabotage. Jerry drew his magic wand, waiting for Ted's signal. Hog fought harder. He raised his hammer and smashed the chieftain's axe, affected by Ted's silent force. Release it flew from his hand. Hog rammed a brutal headbutt, skewing the opponent's long snout. Blood spurted. Then Hog bit the chieftain's neck and shook, tearing in a frenzy. Blood splattered everywhere. The surrounding jackalware froze. They hadn't taken this stranger seriously, but the situation flipped. Their leader grew weaker, while the challenger grew fiercer, until in an instant, the chieftain was dead. The corpse lay where it fell. All eyes were on Hog, the new leader. "I, Hog, leader of the jackalware. If anyone doubts it, come and challenge me," he barked in jackalware tongue, raising his flail and howling madly. At the same moment, Ted sent Jerry and Sherry the telepathic signal. Now. Under the scorching sun, flames flared in an instant. Jerry and Sherry set the camp alight. Ted also reconnected with Rat Brother and shifted his view toward the cave. The old werewolf had been oblivious, eyes closed and muttering his prayers. Through Rat Brother's eyes, Ted cast appraisal on him. Jackalware Priest, level Jackalware, level 5, Elite Unit, level 2, Earth Shaman, level 2, Yinogu Priest, level 3. Attributes: Strength 7, Constitution 7, Agility 6, Intelligence 7, Perception 9, Wit 9, Charisma 6, Luck. Talents: Spell Focus, green, a seasoned spellcaster, not easily disturbed during casting. Lawful Evil, green, skilled and prestigious in organized wrongdoing, a natural evil leader. Poison Resistance, green, professional experience grants high resistance to poisons. Robust Body and Mind, blue, special experiences and training make him very hardy in body and mind, not easily broken. Third Circle Yinogu Divine Magic, blue, divine magic granted by faith in his god. Jackalware Prestige, blue, natural prestige among jackalware, exerts deterrence and leadership over some evil creatures. Equipment: Spine Staff, green, Yinogu Divine Emblem, green, Beast Hide Robe, green, Earth Bracers, green, Verdant Ring, green. Skills: Staff Mastery level 3, Summon Jackalware level 3, sealed. Ghost Hyena level 3, Earth Shock level 3, Stone Skin level 3, Summon Ghoul level 2, sealed. Summon Abyssal Demon level 2, sealed. Bull's Strength level 2, Desecrate level 2, Ghoul Touch level 2, Dispel Magic level 2, Command, Stun level 2, Despair level 2, Magic Weapon level 2, Magic Stone level 2, Hold Person level 2, Magic Armor level 2, Evil Triple Strike level 2, Fly level 1, Detect Good level 1, Detect Law level 1, and more. Evaluation: a jackalware shaman from a high magic alternate world and a priest of a high-level entity, battle-hardened and very dangerous. A powerful spellcaster roughly equivalent to level 12, wielding Third Circle divine magic and several green-tier items. Very strong. The old werewolf, who had been murmuring with closed eyes, suddenly opened them and snapped his head toward Rat Brother. "Who is there?" he demanded. Thanks to Reader, Loving Someone 520, for the 400-point reward. Thanks also to readers, Cold Light Shines on Iron Armor, Gazing at the Stars Moon, Black Harker, and Chi Kingdom Young Master Zhang for the 100-point rewards. 212. Master Hog has rebelled. Master Hog has rebelled. Ted had worried that identifying him would alert him. It did. With 9 points in perception and spirit, the old werewolf was extremely sensitive to detection and immediately noticed the anomaly. Rat Brother darted out at once, heading for the cave entrance. The next second, the corner where he had been hiding was struck by a flying stone. The old werewolf's spell of stone, a rock shot like an arrow. At the same time, fires erupted across the jackalware camp and spread in an instant. A group of jackalwares, having just lost their leader and now watching their homes burn, fell into chaotic panic, whining and yelping. Ted snapped his fingers and his summoned allies appeared in the camp. The troll, the earth golem, Chicken Bro, and the big white horse Cabbage. Chicken Bro puffed out his chest and held his head high, sneering at everything, while Cabbage looked around with all his big horse teeth bared. "It's my turn? Finally my turn to fight? Who's the enemy? Ted casually hurled a fireball into the clustered jackalweres. It exploded like a landmine and sent several flying. Then he stepped onto the wooden wall and cast a firestorm from above. Within breaths, the entire camp was choked with smoke and raging flames. Ted left them to it. His summons would handle the rest. He wanted them to cut down as many as possible while he went after the old werewolf priest. The troll chuckled, swinging his huge club, and charged, sweeping two jackalweres off their feet with a roar. The earth golem's arms transformed into massive hammers and blocked the only escape route, smashing a fleeing jackalwere into pulp. Chicken Bro made an aerial pounce and with one peck burst a jackalwere's eyeball. Cabbage tilted his head, opened his mouth, and bit the short sword on his saddle, activating his peculiar skill, sword control with his mouth. He looked the least threatening, lacking Chicken Bro's bluster, but his swordplay was surprisingly precise. His first move disarmed a tetanus greatsword, his second slit a throat. Sherry hung upside down from the eaves, daggers in hand, and silently stabbed the back of a jackalwere's head. The camp was a melee, enemies pressing and panicking, when Grandpa Hog, covered in blood, picked up the jackalwere chieftain's hand axe from the ground, one in each hand, and with a grim smile leapt into the fray. Axes and hammers flew, flesh and blood splattered. Inside the cave, the old werewolf Alkin sensed something wrong and casually cast a spell of stone. The rock missed, something very fast and white had slipped by. Ordinary mice wouldn't enter here, they'd flee at the entrance. Alarmed, Alkin grabbed the bone staff beside him and rose to leave. At that moment, the two jackalwere guards at the cave mouth were already down, one felled by Jerry's stupefy, the other pecked through the skull by Ansu. Chicken Bro's bravado was mostly for show. The real lethality had been Ansu. Ansu had flown into the cave and spread darkness like ink blooming in water. Alkin, who had only moved a few steps, stopped as utter blackness poured over his vision. He pricked his ears, raised his hand to see, but saw nothing. This was no ordinary darkness. A deep darkness spell? He wondered, testing his spell identification. If it were a normal darkness spell, his dark vision would still grant him monochrome sight. This was complete obliteration. Fighting blind would be suicide, so he decisively used a divine spell, Dispel Magic. A strange fluctuation washed out from him, and the darkness vibrated, then dispersed. From Ansu's opening his dark domain to the dispel took only 7 or 8 seconds. Jerry hadn't even had time to enter the cave. Ted arrived then and said, "Let him come out. A fight in the cave would be bad for us." If Ansu's dark domain had held, the cave would have been Alkin's grave. But since it was broken, a magic duel underground was unnecessary. An empowered fireball in that space could kill them all. What came out of the cave, though, were not Alkin, but two large, well-fed, translucent, milky white hyenas, heads about chest-high to Jerry. They whimpered and charged. Alkin had more options. He could have summoned jackalweres. As a jackalwere priest, he excelled at summoning ghouls, abyssal demons, whole squads called by his god Yinohu, lord of the 422nd layer of the abyss. He'd been both an earth shaman and later a mid-level priest of Yinogu, strong in magic and melee, long range and close range. He had never lost a fight, but suddenly thrown into this world, most of his summoning spells failed, and many divine spells wouldn't respond. He'd built a small altar to contact Yinogu, but got nothing for days. Now, when a strong enemy arrived, he could only conjure 2 spectral hyenas, an earth shaman ability that had survived the world change. The 2 spectral hyenas were fierce. One leapt straight for Jerry's face, jaws wide as if to bite his head off. The other, aiming for Ted, made a sharp turn within 2 meters and tried to get behind him. Spectral hyenas were fast and weightless. Jerry, abandoning a wizard's dignity, countercharged with a lazy roll, sliding under the hyena's belly. Before he could stand, he cast a stunning spell on it, though he couldn't manage a slide tackle. Ted didn't choose a single target spell either, too risky at that range and against such an agile foe, so he used an area attack, a 360-degree frost nova. Spectral hyenas were mostly energy and immune to 80% of physical damage, but they took full damage from magic. The hyena behind Ted froze solid, its translucent body encased in ice. Jerry's hyena was stunned from behind and slowed. Jerry scrambled up onto a nearby wooden house. Then the old jackal-weir emerged from the cave, a strange bone crown on his head, a patched leather robe, leaning on a bone staff carved from a spine. His dim, sinister eyes swept first over Jerry on the rooftop and then fixed on Ted. He could clearly sense magical strength. Ted's frost nova had left unmistakable fluctuations. Human whelp? Alkin's heart sank. Were his jackal-weirs discovered by humans? It seemed impossible that only these two 13-year-olds would attack a camp of 70 or 80. Perhaps a stronger human was lurking. He was suspicious, naturally so, but who would expect just three 13-year-old children to pick this fight? Yet Ted gave a strong impression. Not a raw novice, but a young wizard who had graduated from apprenticeship, perhaps a prodigy. Such a wizard wouldn't risk adventuring with only a clumsy, non-human apprentice like Jerry. Surely there would be warriors, barbarians, paladins, or rogues among their allies? While Alkin watched and schemed, Ted was not idle. The old werewolf was seeing Ted for the first time, but Ted had been studying Alkin for hours. When Alkin stepped out, Ted barely glanced at him, and instead fired 3 azure frost rays that lashed the frozen hyena behind him, turning it into a block of ice in 2 seconds. He waved again. An enhanced mage hand slammed it, shattering it into scattered shards. Then, Ted used the card Punishment Red. A thin bolt of golden lightning descended on the hyena that had been trying to bite Jerry beneath the eaves and turned it to ash without a cry. Though using the card felt like a waste, it had a restriction. It could be used only against non-humans. Jackal-weirs, while jackal-like, were still humanoid, so Ted couldn't use it on them. He cleared the field instead, preventing the old priest from getting another helper. Alkin's canine eyes widened at the instant kill. He had similar means to eliminate spectral hyenas, but Ted's casualness unnerved him. Was the young man carrying powerful magical equipment? He felt a rising urge to retreat. Tactical withdrawals were second nature to him. He even had a dimension door scroll. I was going to schedule the previous chapter, but I ended up publishing it directly. So there's only one chapter today. Old Alkin, the old jackal-weir priest, didn't want to fight, but the young man named Ted didn't play by the rules. He gave Alkin no time to think and launched a fireball at once. The casting was unbelievably fast. In a second, Ted had raised his hand and thrown it. It was a weakened fireball, only a fist-sized pellet rather than the normal head-sized sphere, but even a fire pellet can kill. Alkin slammed his bone staff into the ground. An arc-shaped red shield sprang up in front of him, a flame defense shield tuned to absorb fire. It could envelop the whole body, or, to save casting time and spell resources, be projected to cover only one side. Alkin had come from Faerun on Toril, where spellcasting relied on spell slots, but divine casters could funnel power through holy emblems and staves and bypass some of those limits. Spell slots were meant to restrict and help lower-level casters, but clever practitioners found loopholes. He had supplied just enough divine energy through his staff and emblem to activate the shield. The fire pellet hit the red barrier, blooming into a basin of sparks before dissipating. Alkin felt a twinge of concern. This was stronger than he'd expected. He had assumed the brat's quick casting would be little more than harassment, but if that pellet had hit undefended, it would have burned him badly despite his natural fire resistance and magic leather robe. Where had this kid come from? Ted didn't wait to be second-guessed. With 2 syllables and a wave of his wand, he fired a triple ice arrow. With his left hand, wandless and silent, he sent a triple frost ray. Don't like fire? Then have ice, he thought, and pressed the assault. Alkin had been ready to withdraw. He worried the youths might have reinforcements. But Ted's relentless offense made him angry. Jackal-weirs didn't generally take blows like that lying down. He swore a vicious oath about ripping out hearts for his lord, and then, like a man who'd survived the wilderness by guile and luck, poured a string of divine spells through his staff in rapid succession. Endure elements, protection from energy, divine favor, aid, bear's endurance, bull's strength, stone skin, shield of evil. The lights of those blessings flashed around him in a single instant. Ted watched colored motes of magic flare and was shocked as the old jackal-weir took 3 ice arrows and several frost rays full on, even with the shield. Then, Alkin changed. The gaunt, withered werewolf swelled in body and muscle until he towered over the jackal-weir chieftain. a hulking figure with his bone staff raised. Priests were not the frail healers from tales. They were frontline warriors, men in armor, swinging staves and hammers backed by a dozen divine boons. Ted tried to slow him with a frost nova erupting from his feet, but Alkin answered with a bestial roar. The sound carried divine command woven into it. Awoo! And Jerry, who had been hiding on a rooftop preparing a sneak spell, froze stiff in place. The roar was a command spell, meant to stiffen and paralyze enemies. Ted, however, was a mind mage and had superior mental defenses. The roar only seemed loud to him. His frost nova also failed. The old priest's buffs negated the freezing and slowing effects. Ted flicked his hand and made a break for it. Alkin's dog face contorted into a snarl. There was no way Ted would handle a direct brawl with him. Ted pulled a card instead, Boar Firecracker, green. A massive wild boar erupted into being and charged the priest. Alkin, moving with the speed and cunning of a rabbit and a falcon, swung his staff down with the force of an earth shaman's earth shock. The staff struck the boar, ripped a shallow crater in the ground, and sent a shockwave of dirt outward. Yet the boar passed through him and vanished into the mountain face. Illusions, Alkin realized with a hiss, playing tricks on him. Command stun, the old priest barked, pointing. Ted felt his body slow to amber-hard stiffness, frozen in place by the direct, targeted spell. He had never seen a magic that hit a single person so cleanly without outward signs. Was it a curse? There was no time to puzzle. Ted activated his psionic power. With a sharp bang, the air around him rippled like a pocket of displaced space. The instant psionic shock waved through 3 meters, breaking the stun. Alkin froze for a heartbeat. Had the command failed? He answered by lashing out with despair, a black light descending on Ted's head. The safety helmet charm Ted wore flared uselessly. This was a non-corporeal, curse-like effect that ordinary charms didn't block. But Ted's mental defenses were rock solid. He felt a tremor of despondency, and then it was gone. The old priest's confidence faltered. Ted's resistance made him reconsider. Maybe it was time to retreat. But he wouldn't flee without taking his idol. Abandoning his lord would be sacrilege. He lashed the ground with his staff and made a dozen nearby stones leap into the air, splitting into a rain of razor pebbles. The stones were a variant of the magic stone spell, turned into fast-flying bullets. Ted pretended to be occupied deflecting the stones, but at the same time he silently cast Sectum Sempra. 2 invisible, crescent-shaped blades arced toward Alkin's lower back and the base of his skull. Gravel peppered Ted like buckshot. His safety helmet charm blossomed with ripples and stopped the worst of it. The pebbles scattered. The 2 silent crescents slammed into Alkin's lower back. Alkin's buffs protected him. Stone skin had already made his hide like blue granite, and more importantly, a thin, shadowy shield wrapped him. The Shield of Evil, a divine protection granted to him by Yinogu for past service. It was broad and unusually strong. Under normal circumstances, Ted's level 5 Sectum Sempra with magic penetration might have cut through easily, but the Shield of Evil took the blows. It flickered nearly transparent, nearly breaking, but it held. Little brat, Alkin growled. Cunning. He felt the chill at the base of his neck. That last strike had nearly pierced his defenses. He should withdraw, retreat, and live. But he couldn't leave the idol. He slammed his staff hard into the earth. The ground shivered. An earthquake knocked Jerry off the rooftop and sent him sprawling. Alkin paid Jerry no mind. His eyes were on Ted. Ted hadn't expected this. His footing wobbled, and a spell he was mid-casting collapsed. Alkin seized the moment and hurled a cluster of quick spells. A sound burst caused moderate wounds, and finally Yinogu's hammer. The air hummed with crackling divine malice. The safety helmet charm around Ted began to break down. The phantom of a 3-headed flail, the image of Yenohu's hammer, descended and smashed the helmet. The charm cracked and shattered in a spray of sparks. Ted's heart lurched. That helmet had once withstood a full-power fireball. He took a step back to recast protections, but Alkin tried to make his escape into the cave. Jerry, who had fallen and was no longer useless, had other plans. He crawled, cast a skidding jinx on the ground, and treated the fleeing priest like a fighting troll. Alkin slipped and fell flat on his face. Ted didn't let him recover. He slapped down a card. Gravity ball. Blue. The gravity around Alkin flipped and yanked him backward. The old priest, halfway to his feet, was yanked 2 meters backwards and slammed into the earth. The sudden shift nearly tore his organs from their moorings. Only his high constitution saved him from internal rupture. Before Alkin could rise, Ted uttered 2 more syllables. An unusually thick ice arrow slammed into the ground at the cave mouth, and an ice wall shot up, sealing the entrance. He had to make sure whatever the priest planned inside couldn't happen. "Don't be in such a hurry to leave," Ted called. "Let's have a second round. I just realized the chapter count has gone past 210. I'll have to live with the mistake. I've lost my head. Ted, I convince people with virtue. I convince people with virtue." A sharp hand axe bit into the back of a jackalware's skull. The creature tried to turn, eyes wide with surprise, but it was already dead. Hog kicked the body, pulled the blade free, and inspected it. It was the polished, well-kept hand axe of the jackalware chieftain, clean and razor-sharp. The other jackalwares fought with rusty, brutal weapons. A true craftsman kept his tool in order. No wonder he'd been the chief. The jackalware camp burned. Fires licked at tents while earth golems sealed the only exit. 2 thick, beam-like arms had become mud hammers that swung without pause. Any jackalware caught in their arc was pulverized. A troll with a massive club paced through the carnage, smashing skulls and snapping spines. Gore and brains splattered the ground. It was brutally efficient. Cabbage, the big white horse, was almost elegant by comparison. He held a short sword in his mouth and fought like a trained duelist. Draws, guards, parries, thrusts, precise and controlled. Several jackalwares had thought a white horse would be an easy target. Each one who came close ended up with a blade in the chest or a slit throat before the third move. When too many swarmed him, Cabbage executed a horse leap, an aerial bound that carried him 7 or 8 meters clear of the melee. A graceful tactical retreat capped by a disdainful snort that flapped his emo bangs. Sherry worked from the shadows with 3 daggers. One was wrapped around her tail, hidden until she needed it, giving her a whipping, ghost-like range that specialized in surprise. Most ambushes ended with a single quiet kill. Ansu was a streak of black, a disappearing head and a single claw for each victim, the most efficient butcher among them. Chicken Bro, a huge, raucous rooster, flapped and squawked and set the mood. He pecked out the eyes of 4 or 5 foes and disabled several more. He was more theatrical than lethal. And then there was Grandpa Hog. Having just killed the old werewolf and taken the chieftain's axe, he suddenly turned on his own kind with a ferocity 100 times greater than before. Fighting your own people was the cruelest thing of all. He backstabbed and cleaved dozens in a single sweep. 7 or 8 fell at once, then 10 more who hadn't yet realized what was happening. Under the relentless flames and the pounding of their allies, the 70-odd jackalwares in the camp, exhausted, wounded, unable to lift their weapons, were almost entirely wiped out in 5 or 6 minutes. When the smoke thinned, Ansu folded his wings and rose into the air. He shouted down to the others. "Cabbage, Chicken Bro, Sherry, hold the rear. Deal with the stragglers. The rest of you, follow me." The second round had begun. Ted wanted one thing above all, to exploit their advantage in numbers. Ted called up that same ridiculous motto again, half joke, half battle cry. "I always win people over with virtue." Ansu made the short hop, 300 to 500 meters, with only a few strong beats of his wings. After the old werewolf had shattered Ansu's dark domain, Ted knew this fight wouldn't be quick. That old bastard had tricks. Leaving Ansu to pick off the smaller threats would avoid alerting the old werewolf and let the main force finish him later. When Ansu reached the front lines, he found a giant snowball, enchanted by an enlargement charm to a full meter in diameter, rolling after the old werewolf like a comical, lethal comet. Another magic disc, serrated and rimmed with sharp teeth, spun through the air to cut off his path. Ted and Jerry kept up a stream of spells, constantly harrying the old werewolf. The modern magic system of this world had flaws, but its biggest advantage was speed and convenience. Ted and Jerry took full advantage of that. Fast, disposable spells fired relentlessly. They had discovered the old werewolf, Alkin, was frighteningly dangerous in close quarters. He wielded his staff with practiced force. If he closed to within 3 meters, one swing could turn the pair of them into paste. In their fragile, childlike bodies, they could not let that happen, so they moved, non-stop, one spell after another, throwing out distractions, traps, and harassment. The snowball wouldn't have killed him by itself, but Ted could weave more dangerous ice magics through it. The spinning saw was the sort of thing Alkin wanted to smash with his staff instead of dodging, but he couldn't risk a single opening. Alkin was from Faerun, a world that ran on D&D-style magic. He'd once been a capable third-level cleric, balanced between ranged magic and close combat, well-equipped and well-rounded. But here, his spellcasting was a handicap. He had limited spell slots, and after crossing worlds, he'd lost contact with his deity. Many divine spells were unusable. It was like losing a leg. His only real advantage now was his devastating melee skill. Ted's trickery paid off. When Alkin smashed a rocking toy with an obvious once-a-day petrifying strike, it revealed how he would scramble to survive. Alkin cursed when he spotted a giant crow with huge magical fluctuations circling above. Reinforcements? He couldn't afford that. He started casting retreat spells. He lashed out with a stone spell that sent dozens of pebbles, turning the sky into a falling hail of rock. Worrying that a single stone wouldn't stop the small brats, he used his magic ring to conjure a spray of green, viscous acid, dropletting across a wide arc. Jerry, popping his head out from behind a nearly destroyed wooden house, fired Stupefy at the fleeing werewolf. But Alkin didn't dodge. He took the hit head-on, or so it seemed. Ted reacted instantly. The Stupefy had been a feint. Psionic energy flooded out of him in a mind blast. Psionics don't affect matter. They strike at anything that thinks. Within 50 meters, any self-aware mind felt the shock, except Jerry and Ansu, who were allies and were ignored by the psionic discrimination. The blast ripped through space, and like visual static, a blurry figure 30 meters away rippled and vanished. Alkin had used a scroll of greater invisibility. Greater invisibility hides you even from ordinary magical detection. Alkin had planned to follow invisibility with a dimension door, slip through and be gone to the other side of the mountain, invisible and uncatchable. He'd trusted the mirror-like protection of his beast skin robe, an invisible teleportation, foolproof. Ted had already thought about this. During a holiday, he'd learned apparition from Sirius. He wasn't a master. Apparition was dangerous, often dismembering the unwary, and it usually took more than 10 seconds for him to do it safely. But while studying that magic, he'd also thought about defenses, anti-apparition charms, and spatial anchors. He didn't need full anti-spatial magic. He could use psionics to disturb nearby space. If the local space was unstable, any attempt at instantaneous spatial movement would be likely to end with someone ripped to pieces. Invisible, Alkin tore open a dimension door scroll and looked to plunge through. The scene on the other side, the far mountain slope, flickered like bad reception. The image rippled and stuttered. If he dove in now, who knew how he would come out? Ted sensed the invisibility and countered with a card. He slapped down Moonlight Stone. What had looked like a child's stage light now acted as an invisibility probe. A bright beam of moonlight snapped into being and bathed where Alkin's head would be. Even if Alkin himself remained invisible, a column of moonlight clung to him and followed wherever he moved. The old werewolf's invisible head was suddenly outlined, a glowing target in the night. Thanks to reader Cat Who Catches Dogs for the 100-point reward. 215. Left 0, right fire. Lei Gong, help me. Left 0, right fire. Lei Gong, help me. At that moment, the troll, the earth golem, and Grandpa Hog all appeared. The troll grinned stupidly, swinging a blood-smeared club and snickering at Alkin. The earth golem, expressionless except for 2 dull eyes, stood like a boulder. Hog bared his sharp fangs in a feral smile. Blood dripped continuously from the axe hammer in his hands. Alkin blinked in surprise when he saw Hog. Where had this powerful Jackalweir warrior come from, and why would he team up with these people against him? Alkin tried to shrug off the glowing light over his head, but it tracked him relentlessly. No one could see the light, but they all knew it was there. Looking at the enemies hemming him in from all sides, his heart sank. A dragon, 7 or 8 meters long, formed of red flame and flickering with sickly, multicolored sparks and auras, circled the air, bearing fangs and claws before diving straight at Alkin with jaws wide. The spectacle was impressive. Coupled with Ted's earlier dramatic gestures behind the troll and the others, so convincing and theatrical. Alkin had taken it for high-level magic and wasted his last dispel for the day. The dragon firework burst in midair into a shower of sparks, beautiful but deceptive. Alkin's face went pale. He'd been tricked again. Several times already, each ruse different. Ted had used information asymmetry to deceive the enemy badly. Even Jerry, watching from the sidelines, was impressed. This is the cunning of a wizard. Sherry just rolled her eyes. Is this what your school teaches? Feels like a scam. The fight on the ground had already ended. Now Ted, Jerry, Sherry, Ansu, Baikai, Brother Chicken, Hog, the Troll, the Earth Golem, and even Rat Brother surrounded Alkin, launching a righteous group beating. Alkin, leaning on his priest's melee training, tried again and again to smash through the front line and reach Ted and Jerry, imagining flattening each of them with a single staff strike, the thought itself reviving him. But what a front line it was. The Troll and the Earth Golem were like two moving hills blocking his escape, and Hog lurked at the side, viciously launching sneak attacks at critical moments that ruined every breakout attempt. Baikai held the second row, Ansu hovered in the sky, and Jerry and Ted applied constant spell interference. Alkin had every buff stacked on him: enchanted weapon, enchanted armor, divine grace, divine favor, strength of the wild, aid, stone skin. Even Path of Nature, which he hadn't used in years, was dusted off. Stoneclaw Totem, Earthbind Totem, Lightning Shield, everything was in play. There were simply too many enemies. Individually, Alkin could have handled two of them. But two spellcasters in the back made it lethal. Above his head, a dangerous crow hovered, shedding black feathers that sliced toward him like knives. Ted, watching, realized that this old werewolf, Alkin, was genuinely strong across the board. But as a spellcaster, his spell reserves were thin. He was a priest, not a dedicated mage. Jerry kept slipping and sliding underfoot, forcing Alkin to slam his staff into the ground to counter. Ted fired Ice Arrow from his wand with one hand while carving 5 modified frost rays with the other, threads that reached out to tangle and weaken Alkin's defenses. If it weren't for Alkin's exquisitely cast stone skin, he would have been cut to pieces long ago by Ted's merciless magic. As the Troll and the other summons neared the end of their duration, Ted saw that Alkin was close to breaking and decided to finish it. He darted forward, running nimbly along the wall of a nearby wooden house and leaping onto the roof as if walking flat ground. Jerry and Sherry were stunned. This was something they'd thought was unique to them. That maneuver was the effect of spider climb shoes. "Didn't expect that, did you? I'm a squirrel too," Ted called, striking a pose on the rooftop. He began gesturing and silently intoning a long incantation. This was not ordinary magic. It wasn't from this world, nor from D&D or Azeroth. Ted had learned it from that Taoist immortal, lightning magic. His eyes flared blue, a brilliant flickering light. "The azure sky is dead, the yellow sky shall rise. Left 0, right fire, lightning lord assist me." He snapped his wand. Crack! A bolt of lightning struck Alkin's head instantly. All protections shattered. In an instant, the old werewolf collapsed, blackened and charred. Hog charged in mercilessly and smashed the remains with a hammer blow. The fight was over. Ding! You have completed the quest Husagnol Camp. Reward, 780 experience, random card tie 3. Ding! You have completed the quest Clear Danger Red. Reward, 1800 experience, card Mist of Fate. 10 seconds later, the Troll, Hog, and the summoned creatures faded as their durations ran out. Only Jerry, Sherry, Ansu, and Baikai remained, looking down at the blackened corpse. Jerry squinted up at the sky in a comic moment of confusion. "Is it thundering? Should I go grab my cloak if it's raining?" Sherry snorted. "Your school teaches this? I give it 0-star reviews." Jerry waved a hand solemnly. "Hogwarts does not teach this, children. Don't play with electricity. Try Stupefy instead." Despite the surprises, the fight had gone as planned. If it had dragged on longer, Alkin would have been exhausted, but Ted still had cards and potions in reserve. Restore Stamina Green, Forged Lucky Coin, various potions, and items like the Eye of Dizziness, ring he hadn't even touched. And a promotion card used on Ansu alone would have let Ansu mop the floor with the old werewolf. In the end, Alkin was only a level 12 enemy, a tricky, multi-talented one, but beatable with superior resources and numbers. Ted had the numbers and had prepared. The battle finished with half the sun left in the western sky. The red sunset painted the still smoking ruins of the camp a desolate crimson. They couldn't press on. The fight had used up too much time and energy. The place stank of blood and burned flesh. Dozens of jackal-weir had died here. It was no place to stay long. Ted and his two companions found a small, normally inaccessible ledge on the mountainside and hauled themselves up. Ted used stone to mud to hollow out a decent cave in the rock face where they could rest for the night. After a simple dinner, magic bread Ted produced with a spell, Ted pretended to sleep and began sorting his gains. Between him and his summons, they'd killed a total of 72 jackal-weir, levels 5 to 8, one level 9 jackal-weir chieftain, and one level 12 jackal-weir priest, Alkin. Experience from monsters: 3,245, the 8 jackal-weir in the river valley earlier, plus 30,246, the 72 in the camp, plus 830, chieftain, plus 2,240, Alkin equals 36,561 points. Add quest experience: mysterious jackal-weir green, 780, and clear danger red, 800, 2,880 more. Total from clearing the camp: 39,441 experience, nearly 40,000, something that would have taken years at school. There were also card drops. From quests, the summon card, Jackal-weir Hog, from Mysterious Jackal-weir Green, had already been used to great effect. Random card No. 3 from Bukuklinawa Couchern, Taunt Green, and Dog Whistle Blue. 1 blue, 2 green. Very lucky. Jackal-weir Watcher Green, Summon card. Summons a Jackal-weir Watcher with Magic Shield, Purify, and Thunder Weapon abilities to fight for you. Duration: 10 minutes. Cooldown: 8 hours. Note: a guardian of major Jackal-weir tribes, a rare spellcaster among Jackal-weir. Limited potential and power, common by system standards, but the advantage is its 3 spell abilities. Taunt. Material card. Some individuals are born to provoke, drawing every eye and daring you to strike. This material is useful. Hiss. Acceptable. Item card summons 2 tracking hounds skilled in pursuit to fight for you. Duration: 30 minutes. Cooldown: 2 hours. Note: close the door. Release the hounds. And there was the card, Mist of Fate, the reward for clear danger. Talent card. Wrap yourself in the Mist of Fate, rendering you immune to prophecy, calculation, divination, and precognition. Uses: 1/1. Note: extremely high level. Even some high-level entities can only glean tiny hints about you. Ted's eyes flew open. A talent card, red quality, immune to prophecy, calculations, divination, precognition, even against high-level beings. He'd always been worried about the god Alkin worshipped, Yinohu, the king of Jackal-weir. He didn't know which world that deity belonged to, but he'd clearly offended something very powerful. Having this card was priceless. No more hesitation. Use card Mist of Fate. The group exploded. You owe me my group? Ah! See the book review section for the new group. Chapter 216, Stud Poker is a kind of wisdom. Listen to the applause. A thin, hazy starlight flickered across Ted's body in the stone cave on the mountainside and vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Ted seemed to shiver for a moment, then lay still. Sherry, who hadn't been sleeping deeply, rubbed her eyes, wondered if she'd imagined the light, and turned over to sleep again. Jerry, on the other hand, snored on without worry. He trusted Ted, and he trusted Neville. At the cave entrance, the pea-shooter and fume-shroom Neville had placed were keeping watch. No one could sneak in. After Ted used the Mist of Fate card, the little star in the night sky had flickered. A few seers and diviners who stayed up late practicing and stargazing felt something off, though none could say what. The Sea of Destiny was vast. Individual glimpses were small and incomplete. Far away, in another world, on the 422nd layer of the abyssal depths, the jackal-headed demon lord Yinogu, 10 meters tall, all snarling muscle and bone, smashed a several-meter-high altar made of bones. The dozens of bound sacrifices of various races were pulverized. Their souls were obliterated by the blow. No one knew how deep the abyssal depths went. Yinogu, while a true demon lord and comparable to low-tier deities, still wasn't among the most powerful beings there. His great dream was to see his people, the Jackal-weir, prosper. He pictured a prime material plane ruled by his kin, where elves, humans, dwarves, and halflings were nothing but slaves and food. Against the many powerful existences on the prime material plane, that dream was absurd. Yet one of his mid-level priests had somehow crossed the crystal sphere and appeared in another world. That thrilled Yinogu. He used every trick to contact the worshipper and triangulate the location. But the priest, old werewolf Alkin, had been killed. Furious, Yinogu consumed Alkin's soul to send out a beacon. If the beacon lasted a year, he might pinpoint the killer. Then, on that very night, the killer vanished. Gone. Yinogu raged in his plane, but this had nothing to do with Ted. Ted, meanwhile, was checking his haul. It had been a fruitful day. Besides quest reward cards, there were many drops from the Jackalware. Gray item cards tumbled out. Broken spiked mace, clumsy wooden hammer, gray. Ragged leather armor, gray. Smooth leather bracer, gray. Ragged fur, large fang. Jackalware claw. 24 useless gray cards in all. Ted decomposed them at once and gained roughly 20 to 40 experience per card, 767 experience total. Material cards included Bestiality 4, Beast White 5, Jackalware Claw White, Jackalware Fang, and 2 gems, Tiger's Eye green and Malachite green. Item cards, Poison Bolt green, a hand crossbow with 3 poisoned bolts that deal ongoing poison damage and slow targets, 5-hour cooldown. And Stamina Scroll, green 2, consumables that grant +2 constitution for 30 minutes when torn. Summoning cards, Jackalware, Comf 4, Jackalware Assassin, white, Jackalware Spearman, white. Equipment, Wolfskin Armor, and Jackalware Fang Necklace, green. Spell cards, Lasso Strike, white, and Intimidating Howl, white. Only the 2 green gems looked immediately useful among the material cards. The rest were mysteries. The poisoned bolt felt pointless. If Ted had time to use a crossbow, he might as well cast spells. The scrolls were useful but consumable. He wanted to study them to see if they could be replicated. The Jackalware summons were average, stronger than common people, but cannon fodder in mid-level battles. The assassin had a stealth ambush skill. The spearman could thrust. The wolfskin armor was ugly and weak. The Jackalware Fang Necklace added physical damage, but was useless to a wizard like Ted. Lasso Strike could bind legs at 10 meters with weak tracking and auto-aim, but was still inferior to magic. Intimidating Howl could frighten an opponent. All white cards, low level, expected for low-level monsters. More importantly, the Jackalware Priest Alkin had dropped better things, an equipment card and several spell cards. Verdant Ring, equipment. +1 acid resistance. Grants acid spray 3, acid arrow 2, and acid mist haps 1 per day. Earth Shockwave green. Spell. Emits a 5-meter conical shockwave with a chance to knock down, stun, or daze. 10-minute cooldown. Stone Skin. Spell. Turns skin as hard as stone, reducing physical damage for 10 minutes. 3-hour cooldown. Lightning Spell. Creates a lightning shield that shocks melee attackers and adds electrical effects to the caster's melee strikes. Lasts 5 minutes. 5-hour cooldown. Vampiric Touch. Spell. The next melee attack drains life. 3-minute cooldown. Constitution. Spell. One-time use. +2 Constitution. Ted used the Constitution immediately. He had already gained +1 Constitution after the holiday through natural growth, and with that +2 plus the +2 from the Philosopher's Stone, his Constitution was now 8. Though only 13, he looked like a half-grown lad of 15 or 16. His Constitution was roughly twice that of an ordinary person. He was quite sturdy. The old werewolf's loot was interesting. An equipment card and 5 spells. Earth Shockwave's range was small, useless against casting enemies at a distance. Stone Skin was a limited physical shield and didn't block spells, but was excellent for absorbing melee hits. Lightning Shield and Vampiric Touch were useful for close combat. A priest who'd once been an Earth Shaman, Alkin had specialized too much in melee. With those talents, he still lost. Sometimes luck, sometimes poor choices. Faced with a pile of mostly useless cards, Ted's mind started ticking. Keeping everything was wasteful. Why not fuse and strengthen the valuables? The first thought was Grandpa Hog. He was a named summon card, only green quality, but his combat performance and utility rivaled a troll or an earth golem. He was cunning, ruthless, and could hold his own when needed. Unlike a troll or earth golem, Hog could handle more complex commands. "It's you, Smurf Slayer, Hog," Ted muttered to himself. Ted wanted a powerful Hog, a Jackalwere boss with subordinates, maximizing cunning and brutality. He decided to center everything around Hog, the Jackalwere. Step 1. Give him tanking ability with make him draw aggro, then pile on the beastly upgrades. Bestiality, white, 4. Beast white, 5. Jackalwere claw, white. Jackalwere fang. Add a stamina scroll to harden the front line. Ted kept the other scroll to study. Put the equipment on. The 3, wolfskin armor, white, and the Jackalwere fang necklace, green. Layer in stone skin, green, and lightning shield, and if needed, vampiric touch for lifesteal. Don't neglect defense. Add lasso strike, white, intimidating howl, and earth shockwave, green, for crowd control. He questioned whether Hog could master summoning, but figured it was worth a shot. If a pack of Jackalwere were called and all got turned to ash by an incendio, it would be a funny risk. Better to fuse their essence into one formidable leader. So he added the summon cards, Jackalwere, 4, Jackalwere Assassin, white, and Jackalwere Spearman, white. He even threw in a Jackalwere Watcher, green, and a Dog Whistle, blue. Why stop there? He included the Poison Bolt, too. If it could be integrated, fine. If not, so be it. As he packed cards in, Ted's psionic energy spiked. That familiar prophetic surge swept over him, the blessing to the heart, a flash of inspiration. He trusted his intuition, gritted his teeth, and kept rummaging through his stack until he'd added everything that might fit. He shoved in more attachments. Chitinous carapace, green, a magic insect shell that boosted both physical and magical resistance. Mana essence, blue, condensed pure magic. Infinite growth, blue, a growth enchantment for large size. Lurking instinct, green. Ferocity, green. Hot blood, green. He even added an odd weapon item, boomerang wolf fang disc. He nearly dropped in the Millennium Basilisk Fang before thinking better of it. When the dust settled, the tally was ridiculous. 22 white cards, 14 green, and 3 blue. Ted stared at the pile and laughed at himself. So many cards just for you, Hog. Don't let my trust be in vain. He tapped the fusion interface. Fuse. A bright tone chimed. Ding. Fusion complete. You have obtained a new card. Hog, the Knoll Chieftain, red. Ted blinked. Holy crap! Chapter 217. Hog, the Knoll Chieftain. The Knoll Chieftain, summoning card usage. Summon Hog, the Knoll Chieftain, to fight for you. Duration, 3 hours. Cooldown, 7 hours. Note, proper management of duration and cooldown maximizes benefits. Stats, level 9 Jackalwere, level 3 elite unit, level 1 magic creature, level 1 Jackalwere chieftain. Attributes, strength 15, constitution 18, agility 10, intelligence 6, perception 8, spirit 7, charm 5, luck. Talents, cunning, green, +2 intelligence. Smarter than average Jackalweres, chiefly in cunning. Elite unit, green, +1 strength, +1 constitution, +1 agility. An elite among many ordinary soldiers. Tall, green, 1 strength, plus constitution. Much taller and stronger than ordinary Jackalweres. Sharp fangs and claws, green, inflicts heavier physical damage. Ferocious, green, exceptionally fierce and experienced in combat, highly efficient at killing. Jackalwere Prestige, blue, natural prestige among Jackalweres, deters and commands some evil creatures. Commander, red, as a chieftain, he routinely commands his subordinates in battle. Equipment, excellent wolfskin armor, green, inner armor, reduces physical damage. Chitin armor, green, full body armor, excellent physical defense, extremely light, grants +1 magic resistance. Heavy chain hammer, green, one-handed hammer with a chance to deal critical hits. Cruel axe, one-handed axe with a chance to cause dismemberment. Skills, beastly howl, level 5, a howl that drives himself and Jackalwere subordinates into a beastly frenzy. +1 strength, +1 constitution, 1 agility, 20% movement and attack speed, increased physical damage. Has a chance to cause enemies to flee. Summon minions, level 4. Summons 4 Jackalwere barbarians, 3 Jackalwere spearmen, 2 gnawing hyenas, 1 Jackalwere poison crossbowman, 1 Jackalwere lurking assassin, 1 Jackalwere watcher. Taunt, level 3. His mere presence provokes enemies. Active use further incites attacks. Chain hammer mastery, level 3. One-handed axe mastery, level 3. Sprint charge, level 3. Stone skin, level 2. Greatly reduces incoming physical damage. Lightning shield, level 2. Vampiric strike, level 2. Next attack deals 300% damage as lifesteal. Shockwave, level 2. releases a fan-shaped shockwave that can stun, knock down, knock back, or put enemies in coma. Magic Level 2, Magic Resistance Level 2. Lasso Entanglement, Level 1, throws a lasso to entangle targets, causing slow, trip, or binding effects. Throw Boomerang Wolf Fang Disc, Level 1, throws a boomerang disc that can hit multiple times. Evaluation, an elite Jackalware chieftain from a high magic alternate world, not to be underestimated. Red Quality Card, Level 14 Summon. Total talents, 5 green, 1 blue, 1 red, 7 talents in all. Comes with 4 green tier items and powerful skills, especially Level 5 Beastly Howl and Level 4 Summon Minions. He can field a 12-member Jackalware squad of varied classes and even roar to buff them. Very useful, even in battles between wizards. With inherent Level 2 magic resistance, ++1 from equipment, his effective magic resistance is already quite high. Worth the investment. Ted had spent a lot to get him, but it paid off. From now on, Hog would be his main summoning force. After the battle, Ted's remaining cards were Tiger's Eye Stone, green, Malachite, green, Endurance Scroll, Emerald Ring, green, the used Constitution, blue, the talent card, Mist of Fate, and a few others. He was about to close the system and go to sleep when he glanced through his card library and remembered the 3 giant otherworldly roasted pigs he'd killed in Decamund Village, and the hidden quest reward. He still had 3 boar cards, including the one that self-destructs on death. While his luck was good, he might as well fuse them. Would he really keep a self-destructing card in his hand to blow up when he died? After mulling it over, Ted devised a fusion that maximized utility from those cards. Center it on Boar Firecracker, add Flame Enhancement, green, Firecrackers and Flame fit together, add Boar Charge to make it charge harder, and finally add Ignition since it was one-time use anyway. Let it blow itself up. Fuse. Ding, fusion complete. You have obtained a new card, Self-Destructing Charging Fire Pig, blue. Self-Destructing Charging Fire Pig. Item card. Summons a giant boar made of flame that launches a fiery charge at enemies. Duration, 30 seconds. Cooldown, 10 hours. Upon disappearing, it creates a powerful explosion. Note, easily causes friendly fire. Goodness, a self-destructing battering ram. The 30-second duration meant it would detonate at most 30 seconds after summoning. Dangerous. He had to think carefully before using it. Ted checked his experience pool and realized he could level up again. To raise his wizard profession from level 7 to level 8 required 28,000 experience, more than he had. But the talent study gobble reduced the cost by 2,800. He upgraded. Ding, your wizard profession has been upgraded. Your current level is wizard level 8. You have gained 1 attribute point, 1 skill point, magic resistance +1 level, and 1 talent extraction. The passive magic resistance increase at wizard level 8 was an unexpected bonus. Ted's magic resistance rose to level 4. For most little wizards, that amounted to near magic immunity. The single attribute point he received, he put into Spirit, bringing it to 17. Combined with other bonuses, +2 from the Philosopher's Stone, +3 from the Spirit Crystal Servant, his spirit was effectively 22. The effect was profound. His control over magic became far stronger than an ordinary wizard's. Spells that required finesse and fine control were now feasible, even doubled in efficacy. Many of Ted's unique magic variations depended on that high spirit score. Ordinary wizards couldn't replicate them. For his 1 skill point, Ted thought briefly and then upgraded magic penetration to level 2. He might face powerful enemies in the future, not simple characters. Without decent magic penetration, fights would drag. If he'd had level 2 earlier, many opponents' defensive spells would have been far weaker, and he might not have needed to resort to his trump card, Lightning Strike. He devised that move during school, thunder and fire combined, the Thunder God lending power. Only after solving the Chamber of Secrets incident had he had the chance to try it. The experiment had cost him 3 lightning strikes and a dozen electric shocks, and ruined over 150 galleons worth of magic materials. It still wasn't perfect. Casting time was long, target locking had issues, and fast enemies could evade it. But its lethality was enormous, at least on par with high-level offensive spells, and it was currently only level 1. If it could be leveled up, the results would be terrifying. Finally, Ted invoked the talent extraction. 3 cards appeared in his mind, arranged in order. The first showed a figure in a white robe holding a wooden staff, seen from behind. Prophet's Bloodline. Talent card. You possess the bloodline of a certain prophet, granting occasional uncontrollable glimpses into the future. Prophecy plus 3 levels. Glimpse into the future. Uncontrollable fragments of future branches appear at certain times. A prophet-style talent. Choosing this would raise Ted's prophecy to level 4. Coupled with local prophecy magic and some divination methods, he could become a powerful seer, possibly a notorious prophetic charlatan. The chance to randomly glimpse future events was very tempting. A red talent at once. That was exciting. The second card showed a hand emitting strange light. A genie-like being of mist, touched by the hand, was cracking and dissipating. Supernatural Purification talent card. Your left hand gains a special ability. It can consume magic power to eliminate all unnatural objects, energies, and alterations it touches. Note, magic cost depends on the level of the thing being purified, and there is an associated risk. A purple card. It reminded him of Imagine Breaker, but controllable. It wouldn't strip him of spellcasting. There was a cost. Trying to purify something too high level without enough magic power could go badly. Could it affect a remnant like Lord Voldemort's soul? Probably. It might scatter the remnant temporarily and prevent recoalescence for years, though outright annihilation of such a powerful soul might be impossible. The idea of a wizard who could professionally cleanse supernatural threats with a touch was intriguing, but it would push him toward a more hands-on, melee style. A wizard throwing punches with a purifying left hand. Ted weighed the possibilities. He kept studying the cards, turning the choices over in his mind, weighing power against risk and imagining the different paths each talent would open. The third card showed a gleaming scale, a small stone on one side, a huge pile of gold ore on the other, and yet the two sides were balanced. Unequal exchange, talent card. You have touched a hidden rule, grasping the ultimate core of alchemy. The end of equality is inequality. You may attempt completely unequal alchemical reactions, disregarding the usual principle of equivalent exchange. Note, I have thoroughly understood alchemy. The ultimate goal of exchange is a win-win. I win twice. Ted stared. Holy cow, was that even allowed? It tied back to the otherworld knowledge he'd acquired. In July, before he came to Jerry's house, a notification had popped up. Ding talent otherworld knowledge triggered, discovering alchemy read. Recorded the insights of a newly promoted national alchemist, a young alchemist from the world of Full Metal Alchemist who had just passed his national exams but had not yet received a formal title. He had solid basics and a broad range of notes, transmutation circles big and small, material transformation, synthesis, purification, fusion, decomposition, even biological transmutation. He hadn't dived into anything too extreme, mostly some weird experiments combining insects and plants. Cold-resistant mosquitoes that could bite in winter? Ted wanted to drag that guy out and curse him 100 times. Still, this was valuable, and much of it was applicable. In June, before the holiday, Ted had gotten alchemy notes of senior alchemist Balderan. 2 months' worth of alchemical knowledge plus this new talent. Were they meant to work together? Ted grinned. There wasn't much to choose. The path was obvious. Early the next morning, Sherry woke to find Jerry and Ted already up and setting a pot over a small fire. No surprise, Ted always carried light camping gear in his bag for just such mornings. Jerry was stretching. 2 years of morning exercise had left him with good habits. He grinned and with a quick accio to fetch her toiletries spared Sherry the trouble of washing her face and brushing her teeth. Breakfast is simple. Don't mind it, Ted said. I'll make a proper meal in the village later. Simple? The spread looked anything but. Stewed meat, rosemary roasted cuts, sausages, and even freshly baked loaves of bread. Ted's magic did things like that. The stewed and roasted dishes were his impromptu medicinal cuisine, simple herbs and potions, cooked in straightforward ways. They couldn't match a kitchen feast, but for the road, they were perfect. Hogwarts stewed meat, +1 constitution, +10% stamina recovery, lasts 3 hours. Rosemary roasted meat, +1 agility, -10% stamina consumption, lasts 3 hours. Magic white bread, level 3 food creation. restores 50% stamina, 20% minor wound recovery. Mint honey lemonade, made with magically created mineral water, restores 40% magic, calms spirit fluctuations. Sherry ate, surprised at the tangible boosts with every bite. Jerry seemed used to it. Sherry felt a prickle of inferiority. Ever since Jerry became a wizard, she'd felt like she was being left behind, an urgency she covered with extra training and stubborn pride. Her effort had paid off, level 5 at 13. She'd always wanted to prove that even if she couldn't be a wizard, she could still surpass them. But Ted's easy magic made that pride feel fragile. Seeing Sherry staring at her bread, Ted nudged Jerry. Jerry understood her at once. They'd been childhood friends for over a decade. He waved a piece of roasted meat in front of her. See, Ted's on a different level. Even adult wizards don't do this. Some of these recipes were only recently developed by the gnomes in the Hogwarts kitchens. At that moment, Ansu swooped back, breathless. The letters delivered. They were worried, but I reassured them, she said, then sank a piece of meat with relish. Ted had sent Ansu to Dickamond to calm the villagers and Jerry's mother. The group already had some clues about the strange changes. A white deer had hinted at something altering in the mountains, and the Jackalweir's memories mentioned troubling encounters to the west. Today they would follow those threads. After breakfast, they pushed deeper into the range. They crossed a dry riverbed and came to the Wailing Gorge, a narrow cut 17 or 18 meters across and 20 to 30 meters high. The wind howling through it sounded like crying ghosts, hence the name. Along the way, they fought off several packs of fire-aligned, severely mutated beasts. Standing at the gorge's edge, Sherry squatted on a low branch and stared at the opposite bank. "Can we fly over?" she asked. "No brooms," Jerry said. "Or, Ted?" Ted was peering down the gorge. "There's a way to cross, but look, something's moving down there." Jerry craned his head. "The stones are moving?" "A bit like your earth golem," Jerry added. Ted nodded. It wasn't a golem. This was a stone elementing rubble runner, a level 6 elemental. Not native to the area, surely, an otherworld creature here. They dropped down with feather fall, landing on a ledge halfway up. Ted aggroed the creature. 3 consecutive fireballs. 3 fist-sized fireballs struck the 2-meter-tall rubble thing, blackening bits of stone. It couldn't reach them on the ledge, but it tore chunks from its own body and hurled them back. "Stunning spell! Shield charm!" Jerry shouted. The slowed stone projectiles bounced off Jerry's shield. Ted followed. Greater ice arrow. An arm-thick arrow of ice hit with a thunderous crack. Ted muttered under his breath. Science, thermal expansion, and contraction. A clever combination of ice and fire caused the creature's structure to fracture. The elemental fell apart after a few coordinated spells. It had high magic resistance and heavy physical armor, but they'd gotten the math right. The kill awarded 500 experience points, several dozen more than a magical beast of the same level, and it dropped a card. Material card represents the spirit of stone. As Ted picked the card up, he noticed something white behind a large boulder. "This person's a bit exposed," he said. "Where?" Jerry asked. Ted pointed. Beneath the rock lay a skeleton, its clothes long since rotted. Oddly, a card hovered above it. Ted pretended to rummage through a pocket and casually took the card. Item card use. Triggers quest, Dicto's Relic. He touched the watch and a worn pocket watch appeared in his hand. A prompt popped up. Quest triggered. You found remains in this deserted gorge and a pocket watch beside them. Objective. Return Dicto's pocket watch to his family. Reward. 200 experience points. Random card. Just do a good deed. Don't ask about the future. Ted opened the skeleton's wallet. Fortunately, it was leather and still held a crumpled bill and a partially legible electricity notice. Odd relics, but traces of a life. "Since fate brought him to us, I'll find a way to return this," Ted said. He took a large cloth from his bag, waved his wand, and gently wrapped the skeleton. He'd never seen a quest trigger like this. If a reward came of it, all the better. They crossed the gorge and walked another hour. In the distance loomed a towering peak, Sherry pointed. "I know that mountain. Uncle Dog said it's where the dwarves and gnomes gather, Thunder Peak." A new party had formed. Welcome aboard. Thunder Peak was the Ministry of Magic's designated gathering place for dwarves and gnomes. Compared to the subhuman races, these two were treated better. Both had their own forms of magic. Dwarves had a runic system and a talent for infusing runic power into metal to forge enchanted arms and armor, which threatened the goblins' standing. Gnomes were masters of magic tech, inventing odd devices and excelling at transformation and illusion spells. As Ted understood it, the two races hadn't originally come from the same world. They were strangers when they arrived here, but they met first and got along surprisingly well, perhaps because they were similar in size. A few months later, the Ministry discovered them and opened contact. In an unfamiliar world, it made sense to band together, so the dwarves and gnomes chose to settle together. Gnomes weren't great builders, but dwarves were, and along the mid-slopes of Thunder Peak, they had tunneled bunkers into the mountain using runic magic and magic tech. The place was called Iron Hammer Fortress. "I heard the dwarves and gnomes gather at Iron Hammer Fortress," Jerry said. "That's right," Ted replied. "They say the dwarves brought an incredibly powerful magic hammer from another world, able to forge top-grade weapons and armor." Ted had heard all this from Hermione. Her roommate, Clara Sparkle, was a gnome. They were close, and gnomes tended to be chatty. They loved trading stories about dwarves and gnomes. From a distance, the fortress was visible, but it was still far. The mountains were a maze of peaks and ridges, ravines and cliffs. You couldn't go in a straight line. By noon, they had made less than half the distance. "It's unbearably hot for July," Jerry grumbled, wiping sweat from his forehead. It felt like 35, 36 degrees, or worse. Ted cast a super-thin frost armor over the three of them. It offered no protection, only cooling. He was about to heat a pan when he sensed something and called without looking up, "Ansu, drive it off!" Ansu flapped into the undergrowth, and after a minute, returned delighted. Almost got slapped right off its face. A giant mountain lion had been watching them from the bushes. Ansu chased it out and drove it off with a flurry of hard slaps. The farther they went, the stranger things became. Magical creatures seemed unusually numerous. This wasn't the Forbidden Forest. There shouldn't be such a concentration in the wild. The mountain lion had a faint magical signature, barely stronger than the magic in Rat Brother after Ted's transformation, almost like a creature that had only just mutated and begun to manifest magic. There were other odd things too. Immature cicada nymphs that should never have crawled up yet were emerging by the thousands and then dying, crunching underfoot. Ted and the others finished a cramped dinner and decided to speed things up. Walking on 6 legs between the three of them was simply too slow. "Time to ride," Ted said. "Cabbage, you're up." Cabbage was a big horse, but still tight with 3 riders. Ted suggested a little magic, human shrinking charm. Jerry and Sherry accepted and shrank to a bit over a meter tall, the size of 7 or 8-year-old children, so they could all fit. Ted stayed unshrunk. He wanted to be ready for anything. Cabbage complained under his breath until Ted gave him a Satter County cooling apple. That fixed his attitude, and he tore off. The horse bounded over ditches and rough ground as if half the landscape didn't exist, leaping and sometimes gliding 7 or 8 meters to clear ravines. Their pace improved dramatically. Then, Ansu signaled nervously. Through the bird's eyes, Ted saw the scene below, 3 dwarves and 2 gnomes struggling with a colossal creature. It looked like a mash of animals: moose body, eagle talons for its front legs, massive feathered wings, a beak, and branched antlers on its head. Its fur was dark blue, the wing feathers layered in red, blue, and black. It was nearly 3 meters long with a wingspan approaching 5 meters, and it could spit lightning. Ted swallowed. Thunderhorn Hippogriff, level 10 magical creature, level 1 otherworldly being. He watched a dwarf take a small bolt of lightning to his shield and fly 2 meters, smoking and unable to rise. Among the wounded was Clara. "Clara and some dwarves, let's go help them," Ted shouted. Clara swept up her goggles and fired a stunning spell at the hippogriff. The 2-second stun let the lead dwarf, Mr. Shiwaluo, dodge a sudden charge. This Thunderhorn Hippogriff was brutal in close combat. 17 strength, 18 constitution, level 2 magic resistance, a powerful wing-assisted charge, and the ability to spit lightning. Without the dwarf's runic-inscribed shield, which resisted negative effects and let him stand fast, the little squad wouldn't have lasted. Help arrived. From the ridge, a white horse leapt through the underbrush, and 2 spells reached the beast before the rider did: Jerry's laxing charm and Ted's multiple frost rays. The laxing charm briefly incapacitated the enraged creature, and the frost rays wrapped around its wings and legs in silver-blue threads. It shook them off in seconds, but was left rimed with frost and slower. Clara pushed her goggles up. She recognized Ted and Jerry immediately. Her goggles, upgraded after the basilisk incident with functions like keen insight, let her scrutinize every detail. She blinked at them, then at the horse and the third passenger. Wait, rattier tribe girl? And why did that horse look so pleased with itself? Cabbage tossed his head. Always this cool, he seemed to say. With 3 wizards, the battle tipped fast. Jerry peppered the hippogriff with harassment jinxes, skidding jinx, laxing charm, leg locker curse, each lasting only a second or two, but enough to throw the beast off rhythm. Ted held the multiple frost rays in place, one magical line after another, until the hippogriff's legs began to ice and its movements slowed. Sherry, smaller and fragile, hung back. One hit from that creature would have put her in the infirmary. The dwarves were tough. Thrown and smoking, they still got up and kept fighting, but even they looked ragged. Under Ted's cooling magic, the hippogriff began to calm and finally tried to retreat. The dwarves and gnomes hadn't wanted to kill the animal. They'd been trying to drive it off. Ted felt the experience points tick by in his mind for a moment, and then dismissed them. He wasn't going to slaughter creatures just for numbers. If he had to fight, he'd pick the dangerous ones everyone agreed were threats, not an enraged wild beast trying to save itself. The creature limped to the edge of the slope, beat its wings, and flew off in a low, unsteady arc until it vanished into the distance. Ted relaxed the frost charm and climbed down to the group. "Is everyone all right?" he asked. Clara pulled herself together, dusting off her goggles. She looked between them, relieved and grateful. Around them, the dwarves checked armor and bandaged minor wounds. The strange cicadas still crunched underfoot, and the mountains simmered in the late heat, but for the moment, the worst of the danger had passed. "Tuat Hammer, phew, phew, it's nothing, thank you," Captain Shiwaluo stammered, wiping his face. He was the dwarf who led the little party. Clara hurried forward to introduce her friends, Ted and Jerry. Even the dwarves of Ironhammer Fortress had heard of Ted. The basilisk incident in the Chamber of Secrets over the holiday had made the papers for days. His name had spread beyond Hogwarts. Ironhammer's folk dealt with the magical world more often than the half-humans of Daikamon Village, so their news traveled fast. They even had a little stall in Diagon Alley, though it was on the decline. The 3 dwarves looked rough. Beards that had once been braided were matted with grass and dust. Their armor and clothes were streaked with soot. They peeled off their helmets. Steam rose from their sweaty heads. It was a hot July day, and they'd been fighting a giant beast for 10 minutes in full armor, close to heat stroke. Judging by appearance, 2 of them were in their prime, while one looked noticeably younger, his eyes bright with curiosity as he watched Ted. The other dwarf, with a goatee and thinning hair, was Clara's uncle, Muradin Bronzebeard. A clumsy illusionist and a somewhat awkward master of magical engineering, Ted judged from the way the fight had gone. Their mission coincided with Ted's. They'd come to investigate an anomaly. It seemed centered closer to Ironhammer Fortress, so they'd found it earlier. The dwarves preferred to investigate and solve their own problems rather than immediately call the ministry, and Shiwaluo's group was one such team. Clara mentioned, "While I was fighting, I noticed burn marks on the creature, scorch marks along its body." "Burn marks? Have you learned anything more?" Shiwaluo asked. "We've narrowed the area," he answered, meaning they still hadn't found a concrete lead. The anomaly lay 10 kilometers from the fortress, and the sun was dipping low. Grateful for Ted and his friends' help, Shiwaluo invited them as guests back to Ironhammer Fortress. Their objectives matched. Maybe they could cooperate. Thunder Peak was one of the higher summits of the Misty Mountains. The north face of its peak was always stormy, with constant thunder, hence the name. Ironhammer Fortress had been carved into the mountainside. What took 3 years and 6 months to hollow out had become a rocky town, refined over the years. Expansion wasn't an option. Population was limited. There were 42 dwarf families in Ironhammer, totaling 200 to 300 dwarves, and only around 200 other folk living with them. Combined, the settlement barely reached 500 people. The bunker felt too large and a little empty. Elsewhere in Europe, small colonies of dwarves and other intelligent races had been discovered too. Dwarves preferred to build underground or into mountains. They mined and smelted. Ore veins and geothermal furnaces were below ground. Living together kept them warm and safe. The iron gate at the fortress entrance was imposing, 8 meters high, 4 meters wide, with heavy half-meter thick stone doors carved with scenes of dwarf craftsmen shaping iron hammer. Inside the gate, a screen wall diverted the road. It served a defensive purpose. Invaders couldn't charge straight in. Beyond it, a long mountain passage opened up, 10 meters high and 7 or 8 meters wide, flanked by 2 5 to 6 meter stone statues. An old dwarf and a long-haired dwarf with a goatee shaking hands. Ted and his companions walked under those hands into the heart of the fortress. The central square was vast, about half the size of a football field, carved into the hollowed belly of the mountain and ringed with carved stone houses of 2 or 3 stories, staggered and irregular. From their entrance, 5 other exits branched off: mines, smelting halls, artisan quarters. Many dwarves greeted the party as they passed. Shiwaluo clearly had respect here. He led them straight to a nearby tavern where shouts and laughter spilled onto the street. Inside, someone called, "Shiwaluo, any luck?" Found a clue. Shiwaluo threw his helmet on the table with a clatter. "Don't ask. No useful clues, but we ran into a furious beast that nearly flattened us. Look, Solace's beard is singed. That thing, antlers like a stag, the head of an eagle, the body of a moose, spat lightning," the young dwarf chimed in. "Cheers," the crowd roared. "A toast to that monster." Shiwaluo then pulled Ted forward. "This young wizard is Ted Epiphany. You've all heard about him. Diagon Alley's been buzzing. He and his friends helped drive off the beast without casualties. Let's raise a glass." The whole tavern banged their oak mugs. The dwarves were exuberant. Large slabs of meat, great mugs of ale, and booming laughter. Ted thought to himself, "I'm not even an adult yet. I can't drink like this." Still, the hospitality was unmistakable. The young dwarf who had fought with them pushed through. "Ted, can I call you that? I'm Jinli Ironforge. This was my first mission with Captain Shiwaluo. Thanks to you." Ted grinned, picked up a mug, and discovered a practical use for his psionic energy. He could accelerate alcohol breakdown. He became, effectively, a 1,000-cup drinker without the usual consequences. Shiwaluo insisted on footing the bill. The tavern kept bringing out more drinks and meat, and the dwarves ate heartily while oil dripped from their hands. Jerry, already round from the feast, told Sherry regretfully, "Too bad Ron isn't here. He could out-eat anyone." "Is Ron really that good?" Jinli shot back. "I've been called a glutton since I was small." Jerry slapped his thigh. "That's nothing. Ron's a legend. No dwarf gathering was complete without drinking songs and toasts. Long live youth. To the future of dwarves, half-humans and wizards alike." There was no refusal allowed. Ted even broke into song. A heavy metal number, Night Wishes, I Want My Tears Back, and the place erupted. Someone started a ridiculous chorus afterwards, Sea King buys celery, with a Swana imitation, and the tavern went wild. For a while the dwarves forgot decorum and drank one another under the table. Afterward, Sherry, cheeks flushed, helped a staggering Jerry to his feet. They made Jerry drink so many mugs. "If Jerry could handle their strength, those young dwarves would be knocked out by now," Ted said. "They even made an underage kid drink, so immature." "What underage kid?" Sherry asked. "I'm drunk," Jerry groaned. It was a rare chance to learn more about dwarf craft, so Ted stayed after the meal. He ran into an acquaintance, Muradin Bronzebeard, a dwarf student at Hogwarts 2 years ahead of Ted and in the same year as the Weasley twins. They hadn't been close, but they knew each other. Muradin showed Ted a great deal about dwarf rune magic. Dwarves often worked indirectly, inscribing runes on metal to imbue creations with abilities, using magical engineering techniques to channel and store power. Runecraft and magical engineering fit together surprisingly well, each compensating for the other's weaknesses. That was one reason dwarves and wizards got along and lived near one another. They weren't overly secretive. Apart from some high-end techniques, the dwarves shared many basic principles and materials with Ted. That openness was part of an arrangement with the Ministry of Magic. Dwarves could enroll in Hogwarts and even work with the Ministry, and in return their magic systems and knowledge would be shared. Ted had also seen Clara's parents on the platform during mid-June. They held high positions among the dwarves and had helped open doors for him. He left the fortress feeling he'd learned a great deal, so much that, in his own reckoning, he'd gained an extra 345 experience points. The trip had been well worth it.